The boy's knuckles were split and bleeding when he pushed open the steel door. Inside, 6 men in leather cuts turned as one, faces carved from violence, hands stained with motor oil and something darker. The youngest biker reached for his knife. The oldest just stared. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Because children didn't walk into Iron Saints territory after midnight. Not alone, not trembling, not with eyes that hollow. Then the kid spoke. 5 words that made grown men freeze. "My mom's gonna die tonight." The room went silent except for rain hammering the roof and a Harley engine ticking as it cooled. Outside, the Nevada desert wind screamed through broken glass. Inside, something ancient and dangerous woke up. If you want to see how the most feared bikers in Red Hollow County became unlikely heroes, stay until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. This story gets darker before it gets light. The Iron Saints Motorcycle Club wasn't the kind of place you stumbled into by accident. Tucked 3 miles outside Red Hollow proper, down a gravel road that disappeared during dust storms, the clubhouse squatted like a wounded animal beneath a flickering neon sign that read Saints in blood-red letters. The iron had burned out 2 winters ago. Nobody bothered fixing it. The message was clearer without it. Most nights, the garage bays stayed dark until the bikes came home. Then the metal shutters would rattle open and the real work began. Maintenance that went deeper than oil changes. Conversations that never happened in daylight. Bonds forged in the kind of silence only broken men understood. The MC didn't recruit. It didn't advertise. You either belonged or you didn't. And the difference was written in scars nobody talked about. Tonight the Saints had returned from a canyon run that pushed engines to their limits and cleared heads that needed clearing. 6 Harleys sat cooling in the main bay, chrome catching light from industrial bulbs that hung crooked from rusted chains. Leather cuts draped over chairbacks, boots scraped across oil-stained concrete. Cigarette smoke hung thick enough to taste. The men moved with the exhausted grace of people who'd survived something together and didn't need to discuss what. Graves Maddox sat on a workbench near the back wall, a man built from angles and shadows. 42 years old with hands that could rebuild a transmission or break a man's jaw with equal precision. His leather cut bore the president's patch, a skull wrapped in thorns. But he wore authority like a burden, not a crown. Salt and pepper stubble covered a face that forgot how to smile somewhere between Kandahar and home. He didn't speak much. Didn't need to. When Graves moved, the room adjusted around him. "Engine's running rough," Cuttervale said from beneath a Sportster, his voice flat as highway asphalt. He didn't look up. Didn't need eye contact to communicate with men who understood silence better than words. Cutter was the club's ghost. 38 years old, Marine Force Recon, body covered in ink that told stories his mouth refused to share. He'd come back from overseas with a Bronze Star and a drinking problem. The Bronze Star gathered dust in a storage unit. The drinking problem died the day Graves dragged him bleeding from a motel bathtub and made him an offer. Die alone or survive with brothers. Cutter chose survival. He just wasn't sure yet if that made him brave or coward. "Timing's off," Graves said without moving. "Check the cam chain." "Already did." "Check it again." Cutter's wrench stopped mid-turn. For 3 seconds, the garage held its breath. Then he went back to work without argument because Graves was right more often than pride wanted to admit. That was the thing about the Saints. Rank mattered, but competence mattered more. You could wear every patch in the book and still catch hell from a prospect if your maintenance was sloppy. Respect was earned in oil changes and night rides where one mistake killed everyone behind you. Nova Reyes leaned against the far wall, dark eyes watching everything and saying nothing. Club medic. Former Army trauma nurse. 34 years old with hands steady enough to stitch a wound during a sandstorm and a past messy enough that she never talked about the years before the club found her sleeping in a Tucson bus station with a duffel bag and a black eye. The Saints didn't ask questions that first night. They just bought her coffee and gave her a number to call when sleeping in bus stations stopped feeling safe. She called 3 weeks later. Graves picked up on the first ring. That was 8 years ago. Now she kept the clubhouse stocked with trauma kits and knew which brothers woke up screaming and which ones just stopped sleeping altogether. She never judged, never pushed, just existed as proof that survival was possible if you found the right people to bleed with. "Storm's coming," she said, eyes on the horizon through the open bay door where lightning forked across bruised clouds. Radio said flash floods by midnight. Good, Graves muttered. Keeps the civilians off the road. Thunder rolled across the desert like distant artillery. The wind picked up, carrying dust and the smell of rain that wouldn't fall for another hour. Inside the garage, men settled into routines worn smooth by repetition. Cutter under the Sportster, Nova organizing medical supplies, two prospects named Juice and Wraith wiping down chrome until it gleamed. The club's sergeant-at-arms, a tattooed wall of muscle called Anvil, sat cleaning a carburetor with the focused intensity of a man who found peace in mechanical precision. Nobody noticed the kid until the door scraped open. The sound cut through engine noise and low conversation like a blade through silk. Every head turned, every hand stopped moving. The air pressure changed the way it does before violence, that electric charge that makes predators wake up and prey animals freeze. A boy stood in the doorway, 10 years old, maybe 11. Soaked through from rain that had just started falling, dark hair plastered to a pale face, hoodie 3 sizes too big and torn at the shoulder. His jeans were too short, exposing ankles that looked breakable. His sneakers had holes. His hands were clenched into fists at his sides, knuckles split and bloody, like he'd been hitting something that hit back. But it was his eyes that made grown men go still. They were ancient, exhausted, the kind of eyes that belong on soldiers coming home, not children asking for help. "We're closed," Anvil said, not unkind but firm. "You shouldn't be here, kid." The boy didn't run, didn't flinch. He looked at each man in turn, cataloging threats with the cold calculation of someone who'd learned to assess danger before he learned to read. His gaze landed on Graves and stuck there. "I need a helmet," he said. Voice quiet but steady. No tears, no trembling, just facts delivered like a mission brief. Graves didn't move from the workbench. "Helmets are for riders. You ride?" Not for me." The kid swallowed. "For my mom." "Your mom rides?" "She drives. Falls asleep. Every night coming home. I sit in the passenger seat and watch her eyes close." The words came out flat, practiced, like he'd been rehearsing this conversation in his head for months. "Yesterday we almost hit a semi. Trucker laid on the horn, and she woke up just in time. I thought—" He stopped, blinked hard. "I thought a helmet might protect her head if we crash. When we crash. Whoa! Bonmers." The garage stayed silent except for rain beginning to hammer the metal roof. Thunder cracked close enough to feel in the chest. Lightning flashed, throwing the kid's shadow long and crooked across the concrete. Cutter rolled out from under the Sportster. Nova pushed off the wall. Even the prospects stopped pretending to work. Something raw and dangerous moved through the room. Recognition. These men knew trauma when they saw it because every single one carried their own. Graves slid off the workbench. His boots hit concrete with a sound like a judge's gavel. He crossed the garage slowly, giving the kid time to run if he wanted to. Some boys came asking for help. Some came asking for a reason to fight back. Graves needed to know which this was before he made promises he'd have to keep. "What's your name?" he asked, stopping 6 feet away, close enough to talk, far enough to not crowd. "Eli." "Eli what?" "Mercer." "Where's your dad, Eli Mercer?" "Don't have one." No shame, no self-pity, just another fact in a life full of hard truths. Graves studied him for a long moment. The kid didn't squirm, didn't look away. He stood there dripping rainwater onto oil-stained concrete, shoulders back, jaw tight, holding himself together through pure will. Graves recognized that stance. He'd worn it himself at 14 when a recruiter had asked why he wanted to enlist. Because home was worse than war. Because some kids learned survival before they learned safety. "How'd you get here, girls?" Graves asked. "Walked." "From where, sheet?" "Oak and Fifth." Nova's head snapped up. "That's 4 miles in this weather." Eli didn't respond. Didn't need to. His soaked clothes and bleeding knuckles told the story better than words. He'd walked 4 miles through a Nevada desert storm to a biker clubhouse he'd probably only heard about in whispers and warnings. That took either desperation or courage. Maybe both. Cutter stood, wiping his hands on a rag that made them dirtier. Kid that age doesn't walk 4 miles to ask for a helmet. He walks 4 miles because he's got nowhere else to go. I've got somewhere, Eli said quickly, defensive now. I've got home. I've got my mom. His voice cracked for the first time. I just need help. The words hung in the air like smoke. Help! Such a small word for such a massive weight. These men had all said it once, usually at rock bottom, usually to people who turned their backs. The military taught you to be strong. The street taught you to be harder. But neither taught you to ask for help without feeling like you'd failed at being human. Graves glanced at Nova. She gave a slight nod. Whatever she saw in the kid's eyes, it was enough. We'll get you a helmet, Graves said. But first you're gonna sit down and tell me the whole story. No bullshit. You lie to me, we're done. Understand? Eli nodded. Say it. I understand. Good. Nova, get him a towel and something hot to drink. Cutter, make sure that Sportster's ready to ride. Rest of you, give us space. The clubhouse cleared without argument. Prospects disappeared into the back room. Anvil moved to the far bay. Only Nova, Cutter, and Graves remained in the main garage with a 10-year-old boy who looked like he carried the weight of a full-grown man's burdens. Nova returned with a rough towel and black coffee cut with enough sugar to make it drinkable. Eli wrapped his hands around the mug like it was the first warm thing he'd touched in weeks. Maybe it was. His fingers were pale, knuckles cracked from cold and work, nails bitten to the quick. Graves pulled up a folding chair and sat, putting himself at eye level with the kid. He didn't smile, didn't soften. These weren't the kind of conversations that needed gentleness. They needed honesty. Start from the beginning, he said, and don't leave anything out. Eli took a sip of coffee, grimaced at the taste, but drank anyway. When he spoke, his voice stayed steady, but his eyes told a different story, one written in exhaustion and fear and the kind of resignation that comes when you've been drowning so long you forget what breathing feels like. My mom works 2 jobs, diner during the day, cleaning office buildings at night. She leaves at 6 in the morning and doesn't get home until after midnight, sometimes later if the buses don't connect right. She's always tired. Always. I try to help. I make dinner. I do homework on my own. I don't ask for anything because I know there's no money and she's already killing herself to keep the lights on. He paused, swallowed. But lately it's getting worse. Paused, swallowed. But she falls asleep standing up sometimes. Last week she burned her hand on the stove because she forgot it was on. Yesterday in the car, her eyes kept closing. I kept shaking her arm, talking loud, playing the radio. But we almost crashed anyway. The trucker screamed at us. My mom just cried. Then she went to her night shift. Nova's jaw tightened. Cutter's hands curled into fists. Graves stayed perfectly still, the way he did when violence was close and control was everything. Where's home? He asked. Above the old liquor store on Marlowe. Place shut down 2 years ago. Landlord rents the apartment cheap because the building's falling apart. Your mom got family? No. Friends? She doesn't have time for friends. Social services? Eli's laugh was bitter and wrong, coming from someone so young. They came once, looked around, said as long as there's food and I'm going to school, there's nothing they can do. Told my mom to manage her time better. He spat the words like poison, like she's not already managing every second just to survive. Thunder boomed close enough to shake the walls. Rain hammered harder, turning the world outside into a wall of water and darkness. Inside the garage, fluorescent lights flickered once, twice, then steadied. The moment stretched. Graves studied the kid's face, reading trauma markers like a map. Split knuckles from punching something hard. Bitten nails from chronic anxiety. Dark circles from too many nights lying awake, listening for sounds that meant danger. Shoulders hunched from carrying emotional weight no child should know existed. This wasn't a kid asking for charity. This was a boy drowning and smart enough to know it. The helmet was just the excuse. The real ask was simpler and more complicated. Someone notice. Someone care. Someone help before it's too late. Why us? Graves asked quietly. You could have gone to the police, a church, a school counselor. Why walk 4 miles in a storm to a biker clubhouse? I am not short. Eli met his eyes without flinching. Because they'd try to fix it by taking her away from me. Social services would put me in foster care. Tell my mom she's an unfit parent. Break us apart and call it helping. His voice dropped to something cold and certain. You guys don't do that. I heard stories about how the Saints helped a vet with PTSD when the VA wouldn't. About the single mom whose ex was stalking her and you made him disappear. People say you're dangerous. Maybe you are. But you don't break families apart. You protect them. The words landed like artillery rounds. These men had spent years being called outlaws, criminals, thugs, treated like threats by cops and civilians who saw leather cuts and assumed the worst. But this kid, this exhausted, desperate kid, saw past the reputation to something truer. He saw protectors, guardians, men who understood that sometimes help comes from unexpected places, and sometimes the only people who'll fight for you are the ones society already gave up on. Graves stood. He didn't speak for a long moment, just stared at the rain sheeting past the open bay door while his mind calculated risks and responsibilities. Getting involved meant commitment. It meant exposure. It meant if things went sideways, the club took the heat. But walking away meant letting a 10-year-old boy watch his mother die by inches. And that was a sin none of them could stomach. Cutter, he said finally, get 3 bikes ready. Nova, grab your medical kit and whatever supplies you think they need. Eli, you're going to take us to your mom. Right now. She's at work. Eli protested. She doesn't get off until... I don't care. We're going to your apartment first. I want to see where you're living. Then we decide what comes next. You can't just... Graves turned, pinning him with a look that made the kid's protest die mid-sentence. You walked 4 miles to ask for help. I'm giving it. But we do this my way. You want a helmet? Fine. We'll get your mom the best one made. But I don't hand out equipment without understanding the situation. You want our protection? Then you trust us enough to let us see the whole picture. Otherwise, we're done here. Eli opened his mouth, closed it. The fight drained out of him, replaced by something more fragile. Hope. The kind that hurts because it's been beaten down so many times that trusting it feels like volunteering for another round of disappointment. Okay, he whispered. Good. Finish your coffee. We leave in 5. The garage exploded into motion. Cutter fired up his Dyna, the engine's growl filling the space like thunder. Nova packed her medical kit with practiced efficiency, gauze, antibiotics, protein bars, bottled water, emergency cash. Graves pulled on his leather cut, adjusting the weight of it across his shoulders, then grabbed a helmet from the rack, matte black, expensive, barely used. He set it on the workbench next to Eli. This is yours now, he said. Not your mom's. Yours. Because if we're doing this, we're protecting both of you. Understand? Eli stared at the helmet like it was a grenade. I can't pay. Didn't ask you to. But, kid. Graves crouched down, meeting him eye to eye. The Saints don't do charity. We do brotherhood. You walked into our clubhouse asking for help. That makes you ours now. We take care of ours. No strings, no debt, just people protecting people. You accept that, or you walk out that door and don't come back. The rain hammered. The engines rumbled. The moment stretched between them like a challenge and a lifeline. Eli reached out with trembling hands and picked up the helmet. It was heavier than he expected. Solid. Real. The kind of thing that meant someone gave a damn whether you lived or died. Thank you, he managed, voice cracking. Graves straightened. Don't thank me yet. We haven't done anything worth thanking. Come on. They rode out into the storm 3 strong, Graves leading, Cutter flanking left, Nova taking rear guard with Eli pressed against her back, arms locked around her waist, the new helmet steady on his small head. The rain hit like bullets. Wind tried to shove them off the road. Lightning cracked so close the air tasted like copper. But the bikes didn't waver. These riders had trained in worse, survived worse. A Nevada rainstorm was just weather. Eli's directions came in shouts against the wind. Left on Blackwood, right on Marlowe. The streetlights were out. The roads were flooding. Most sane people had pulled over to wait out the storm. But the Iron Saints weren't most people. And this wasn't a social call. This was a rescue mission, the kind where hesitation meant failure. The old liquor store appeared through the rain like a tombstone. Boarded windows, graffiti-tagged walls, a broken neon sign that used to advertise cheap vodka and cheaper dreams. Next to it, A rusted external staircase climbed to a second-floor apartment with a door that hung crooked on broken hinges. No lights. No signs of life. Just decay dressed up as housing. The bikes pulled up under a dying street lamp. Engines cut. Sudden silence except for rain drumming metal and wind screaming through broken glass. The three saints dismounted, moving with the coordinated precision of soldiers clearing hostile territory. Graves scanned for threats. Cutter checked exits. Nova stayed close to Eli, one hand resting on his shoulder, protective but not possessive. "This is it?" Graves asked, voice flat. Eli nodded, shame creeping into his expression for the first time. "I know it's not—" "Shut up. I didn't ask for apologies. I asked for confirmation. Come on." They climbed the stairs single file. Each step groaned under their weight. Rust flaked off the railing. The door's lock was broken, held shut by a chain Eli produced from his pocket. Inside, the apartment was worse than Graves expected and exactly what he feared. One room, efficiency layout, kitchenette with a hot plate and mini fridge, bathroom barely big enough to turn around in, two mattresses on the floor, one full-size covered in diner uniforms and unpaid bills, one twin-size with a threadbare blanket and a backpack that served as a pillow. No heating except a space heater with a frayed cord. No decorations except a photo taped to the wall. Eli and a woman with dark circles under her eyes, both smiling like they remembered what happiness used to feel like. The air smelled like mold and desperation. Water stains mapped the ceiling. The window was cracked and taped over with cardboard. A roach skittered across the counter, too comfortable to bother hiding. This wasn't poverty. This was survival at the ragged edge where one bad day meant homelessness. Nova's hands tightened on her medical kit. Cutter's jaw worked like he was chewing glass. Graves walked through the space slowly, cataloging failures, landlords who took money and provided nothing, a system that saw struggling and called it acceptable, a society that watched single mothers drown and suggested they swim harder. "Where's your mom now?" he asked. "Cleaning the Morrison building downtown, 7th floor. She'll be there until 2 a.m. Graves checked his watch. 11:47 p.m. "We're going to get her." "You can't." Eli's voice rose with panic. "If she loses this job, we're done. They dock pay for missed hours. We need that money for rent. Please, you can't." "Relax. We're not pulling her off the job. We're making sure she gets home safe tonight and every night after. Nova, what do they need?" Nova moved through the apartment with clinical efficiency, opening the fridge, mostly empty, checking the bathroom, mold everywhere, testing the space heater, fire hazard. When she spoke, her voice was carefully neutral. Everything. Food, heat, mold remediation, basic medical supplies. The mom's probably running on empty. Exhaustion, malnutrition, stress. The kid too. "Make a list. We'll handle it tomorrow." "Graves," Cutter said from the window, voice tight. "We got eyes." Us. Everyone froze. Graves moved to the cracked glass, scanning the street below. Two men leaned against a rusted sedan 3 buildings down, smoking cigarettes and watching the apartment. Could be nothing. Could be landlords muscle checking on tenants. Could be something worse. "They're always there," Eli said quietly. "They don't do anything. Just watch. Sometimes they knock on doors late at night asking if anyone needs help." The way he said it made clear what kind of help they offered. Predators circling wounded prey, waiting for desperation to make people make stupid decisions. Graves pulled back from the window. "Pack a bag. Essentials only. You're not staying here tonight." "What? No. My mom will freak out if I'm not here when she gets back. Your mom will freak out more if those guys downstairs decide tonight's the night to come upstairs. We'll leave her a note. Explain everything. She can call me if she has questions. But until I know what we're dealing with, you don't sleep in a place I can't secure." "Where am I supposed to go?" "Clubhouse. We've got a spare room, clean bed, lock on the door. You'll be safe until we sort this out." Eli looked like he wanted to argue. Looked at the two men outside. Looked at his mom's mattress covered in bills and exhaustion. The fight went out of him. "Okay," he whispered. While Eli packed, Nova pulled Graves aside. "You know what we're signing up for, right? This isn't a one-time fix. This is full commitment. Food, security, medical care, probably legal help when the landlord or social services or whoever comes sniffing around. You ready for that?" No, Graves admitted, but we're doing it anyway. Kid walked 4 miles to ask for help. I've seen grown men with less courage. We don't turn our backs on courage. Well, what if the mom doesn't want our help? What if she tells us to leave them alone? Then we leave her alone, but we make sure she knows the offer stands. Always. He paused. You got a problem with this? Nova smiled without humor. I was that kid once, desperate and drowning and too proud to admit it. Someone helped me when they didn't have to. I'm still trying to pay that debt forward. So no, I don't have a problem. I'm just making sure you understand what we're starting. I understand. But the truth was, none of them fully understood yet. They thought they were rescuing a struggling family. What they were actually doing was ripping open old wounds, confronting ghosts they'd buried years ago, and proving that sometimes the most dangerous men in town are the ones who remember what it feels like to need saving. 20 minutes later, they stood outside the Morrison building, a corporate tower lit up like a beacon against the stormy night. Inside, exhausted cleaning crews moved through empty offices, erasing the day's present so morning workers could pretend their world stayed pristine through magic. Eli led them to the 7th floor using a service entrance he'd clearly mapped during previous visits. The kid knew this building, knew the rhythms, knew how to be invisible. They found Mara Mercer in a corner office, pushing a vacuum across expensive carpet while rain hammered the windows. She was thin, too thin, the kind of thin that comes from skipping meals so your kid can eat. Her hair was pulled back in a ponytail. Her uniform hung loose. Her eyes were half closed with exhaustion, even as her body kept moving through pure muscle memory. She didn't notice them until Graves cleared his throat. Mara spun, hand flying to her chest, terror flashing across her face before she saw Eli. Then confusion. Then protective fury as she took in 3 leather-clad bikers flanking her son in an empty office building after midnight. Get away from him, she said, voice shaking but firm. She grabbed a spray bottle like a weapon. I don't know who you are, but, Mom, it's okay. They helped. Eli, get over here, now. Ma'am. Graves raised both hands, palms out, non-threatening. We're not here to hurt anyone. Your son came to our clubhouse asking for help. We brought him to get you, that's all. Clubhouse? Realization hit. You're those bikers, the ones everyone says. Everyone says a lot of things. Most of it's bullshit. But right now what matters is your son walked 4 miles in a storm because he's scared you're going to crash the car and die. And from what I've seen, he's got good reason to be scared. Mara's face crumpled. She looked at Eli, looked at the bikers, looked at her own reflection in the window, exhausted, broken, drowning. The spray bottle slipped from her fingers and hit the carpet with a soft thud. I'm managing, she whispered. No, Nova said gently, stepping forward. You're surviving. There's a difference. I don't need... Maybe not, but your son does. And right now he needs his mom alive more than he needs pride. So let us help, just for tonight. Then you can decide if you want us to disappear. The office stayed silent except for rain and the distant hum of fluorescent lights. Mara looked at Eli, really looked at him, saw the new helmet, saw how he stood close to these dangerous strangers without fear, saw that he'd been brave enough to ask for help when she'd been too broken to see how badly they needed it. Okay, she said finally, just for tonight. But in her eyes, something shifted. A crack in the armor she'd built to survive alone. A tiny opening that light could slip through if given the chance. These bikers had no idea yet how much that moment would cost them, how many old wounds would reopen, how many ghosts would wake up, how thoroughly their lives were about to change. They only knew that a family was drowning, and they'd spent too many years drowning themselves to walk away now. The ride back to the clubhouse was quiet. Mara held on to Cutter while Eli rode with Nova. Graves led through empty streets under a storm that finally started to break. By the time they pulled into the garage, exhaustion had settled over everyone like a second skin. The saints who'd stayed behind didn't ask questions, didn't judge. They just saw a scared woman and a kid who needed safety and immediately shifted into protection mode. Someone made coffee. Someone else pulled out leftovers. Anvil disappeared and came back with clean towels and blankets. The spare room, usually reserved for brothers sleeping off hangovers, got transformed into something almost welcoming. Mara moved through it all like a ghost, too tired to protest, too overwhelmed to process. She kept Eli close, one hand on his shoulder at all times, anchoring herself to the one thing she couldn't afford to lose. When Graves offered her the room, she nodded once and disappeared inside with her son. The door closed, the lock clicked, the clubhouse exhaled. "So," Cutter said, breaking the silence, "we doing this?" "We're doing this," right? Graves confirmed. "You know it's going to get complicated. Everything worth doing gets complicated." Nova poured coffee and didn't speak, but her eyes said enough. She'd seen how Mara looked at her son, seen the same desperate love her own mother had worn before pills and bad men erased the person she used to be. Some rescues were about saving others. Some were about saving yourself by proxy. Nova wasn't sure which this was yet. Maybe both. Outside, the storm finally broke. Rain eased to drizzle. Thunder rolled away toward distant mountains. The desert would bloom tomorrow, brief and beautiful before the heat returned to kill everything soft. Inside the clubhouse, dangerous men made quiet promises they weren't sure they could keep, but would die trying. Because that's what the Iron Saints did. They protected people who fell through society's cracks. They became the family people didn't know they needed until crisis revealed how alone they'd been all along. And in a locked room down the hall, a woman who'd forgotten how to trust, and a boy who'd learned courage from desperation, finally slept without fear for the first time in months. But in the shadows outside the clubhouse, headlights appeared and disappeared. Watchers. Waiting. Because in Red Hollow County, nothing good came without a price, and the men who'd been circling Mara's apartment weren't the type to lose track of prey. The real danger hadn't started yet. It was just catching its breath. Dawn broke over the clubhouse like a threat, cold, gray, unforgiving. The kind of morning that made you question whether survival was worth the effort. Inside the garage, Graves hadn't slept. He sat on the same workbench from the night before, coffee gone cold in his hand, eyes fixed on the closed door at the end of the hallway where Mara and Eli had disappeared 6 hours ago. His mind ran calculations he didn't want to make. Resources, risk, exposure. The math never worked out clean when emotions got involved, and emotions were definitely involved now. Cutter appeared from the shadows like smoke, moving silent despite boots that should have announced him. Force recon training died hard. He didn't speak, just handed Graves a fresh cup of coffee and leaned against the opposite wall. The two men existed in companionable silence for a long moment, the kind only shared by people who'd seen each other at rock bottom and decided brotherhood was worth the climb back up. "You think about what happens next?" Cutter finally asked, voice rough from cigarettes and old screaming. "Been thinking about nothing else. And we're already in too deep to back out clean." Graves took a sip of coffee, grimaced at the taste. "Kid's got hope now. Mom's gonna wake up and realize she slept without panic attacks for the first time in months. We walk away. We prove every bad thing they've ever been taught about trusting people. So we don't walk away." "No, we don't." Cutter nodded slowly. "You know the club's gonna have questions. Anvil's already been asking what the play is. Prospects are nervous. We don't do charity cases. We do brotherhood. This woman and her kid, they're not brothers. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Some of the guys are gonna push back. Let them." "Graves." "I said let them." The president's voice went cold enough to frost glass. "Anyone got a problem with protecting a family? They can bring it to church. We'll vote, democratic process. But until then, we operate on the assumption that we're not the kind of men who watch kids suffer when we've got the means to help. Clear?" "Crystal." Cutter paused. "For what it's worth, I'm with you. Nova too. But you're gonna face resistance, and you need to be ready for it." Before Graves could respond, the door at the end of the hall opened. Mara emerged looking like someone who'd forgotten what real sleep felt like and just got reminded. Her hair was still pulled back. Her clothes were wrinkled, but her eyes, exhausted as they were, held something sharper now. Awareness. The guarded calculation of someone who'd survived bad situations by learning to spot danger before it arrived. She saw the two bikers watching her and went very still. "Morning," Graves said, not moving from the workbench. Non-threatening, giving her space. "There's coffee, food if you want it. Eli still sleeping?" "Yes." Her voice was steady but wary. "Thank you for the room. We'll get out of your way." "Not what I asked." "Excuse me?" "I asked if you wanted coffee, food, not whether you were leaving." Graves set his mug down carefully. You're not a prisoner. You can walk out that door anytime. But before you do, we should talk about what happens next. Mara's jaw tightened. Nothing happens next. You helped us last night. I appreciate it. But I don't need bikers running my life. Didn't offer to run your life. Offered to help you keep it. It's the same thing. No, Cutter said quietly from his corner. It's really not. She turned on him, defensive fire in her eyes. You don't know me. You don't know what I've been through. I've been managing just fine on my own. You've been drowning. Nova's voice cut through the tension like a scalpel as she appeared from the back room, medical kit in hand. Drowning while telling yourself you're swimming because admitting you're sinking feels like failure. I know because I've been there. Different details, same story. Pride keeps you standing right up until it kills you. I'm not proud, Mara shot back. I'm realistic. People like you don't help people like me without wanting something. So what is it? What's the price? Because I can't afford it, whatever it is. The question hung in the air like gun smoke. This was the moment that mattered. Graves knew it. So did every person in that garage. The wrong answer here destroyed any chance of trust. The right answer required vulnerability these men had spent years learning to avoid. Graves stood, slowly, deliberately. He crossed the garage floor with the measured pace of someone who understood that movement could be interpreted as threat. He stopped 10 feet from Mara, close enough to talk, far enough to not crowd. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of absolute honesty. The price is you let us help. That's it. No strings, no debt. No expectations beyond you accepting that maybe, just maybe, you don't have to do this alone. He paused. You think we're going to hurt you, exploit you, use you for something? Lady, we've got enough problems without adding a single mother and her kid to the list. But your son walked 4 miles through a storm to ask for protection. That tells me 2 things. 1, he's desperate enough to take risks most adults wouldn't. 2, he's smart enough to know the difference between predators and protectors. So yeah, we're dangerous. We've hurt people. Done things most folks would call criminal, but we don't prey on families. We protect them. And if you can't trust that, then there's nothing more to say. Mara stared at him, really looked at him, saw the scars on his knuckles, the old pain in his eyes. The way he held himself like violence was always an option, but never the first choice. She was reading him the way she'd learned to read drunk customers and aggressive supervisors and men who smiled too much. Looking for the trap, the angle, the lie hidden under seemingly good intentions. She didn't find one. Or if she did, she was too tired to keep fighting. Why? She asked, voice breaking. Why do you care? Because nobody cared about us when we were drowning. Nova stepped forward, setting her medical kit on a nearby table. We're all survivors here. Different wars, same scars. And we made a promise. Anyone who comes to us asking for help gets it. No judgment, no conditions, just people protecting people. You want to call that charity? Fine. We call it family. The word landed like a grenade. Family. Such a simple concept, such a complicated reality. Mara's eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. Her hands clenched into fists at her sides. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to protect herself and her son by maintaining the walls she'd spent years building. But exhaustion was a hell of a truth serum, and the truth was she couldn't do this alone anymore. Okay, she whispered. What do you need from me? Honesty, Graves said. Tell us what's really going on, the apartment, the jobs, those men watching your building, everything. Then we figure out a plan together, not me dictating, not you surrendering, together. Mara took a shaky breath, nodded once. Can Eli hear this? Should he? No. Some of it... She stopped. No. Nova, check on the kid. Make sure he's still sleeping. Cutter, get Anvil. I want a second perspective on this. Graves gestured to a worn couch near the far wall. Sit. This might take a while. What unfolded over the next hour was a masterclass in how systems fail people. Mara talked, and the bikers listened without interrupting, and slowly the full picture emerged, brutal and familiar and enraging. Her ex-husband had left 4 years ago. taking their savings and leaving her with a mountain of his debt. She'd lost their apartment, lost her job when she missed too many shifts dealing with creditors and courts. Ended up in the apartment above the liquor store because it was all she could afford, and the landlord didn't ask questions as long as cash appeared on the first of the month. The two jobs barely covered rent and food. She'd applied for assistance but made $30 too much to qualify, a bureaucratic knife that twisted every time bills came due. She'd tried to move to something better, but deposits and background checks and credit requirements kept every door closed. The men outside her building had started appearing 3 months ago, never threatening directly, just present, watching, offering opportunities for women willing to work certain kinds of jobs. She'd refused. They'd started getting more insistent. 2 weeks ago, one of them knocked on my door at 3 a.m., she said, voice flat with the kind of calm that meant she'd survived something that should have broken her. Asked if I changed my mind. I said no. He said that was a shame because people who don't cooperate sometimes have accidents, fires, break-ins, things that hurt kids. She looked up, eyes hollow. I called the police. They said without a direct threat there was nothing they could do, suggested I be more careful about who I talked to. Cutter's hands clenched so hard his knuckles went white. Nova's jaw worked like she was chewing nails. Anvil, who'd arrived halfway through the story, looked like he wanted to hit something until it stopped moving. But Graves stayed perfectly still, the way he did when violence was close and control was everything. He'd heard variations of this story a dozen times. Predators circling wounded prey, systems designed to protect people failing at the most basic level, victims punished for surviving. You get a good look at these guys? He asked. One of them, tall, blonde, scar across his left eyebrow, drives a gray sedan with primer spots. Plates start with 7G something. I couldn't see the rest. Graves glanced at Anvil. The sergeant-at-arms pulled out his phone and started typing. If this crew was local, the Saints would know within an hour. Red Hollow wasn't big enough for predators to operate without someone noticing patterns. What about work? Graves continued. You said 2 jobs, diner and cleaning. How long can you keep that up? Mara laughed. Bitter, broken sound. I can't. I know I can't. Eli knows I can't. I'm falling asleep standing up, making mistakes. Last week I dropped an entire tray of food. Manager gave me a warning. One more screw up and I'm fired. But if I quit one job, we can't make rent. If I get fired from both, we're on the street. And if we're on the street... She stopped. Couldn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. The garage went silent, except for the distant hum of the space heater and someone's breathing that sounded too loud in the stillness. These men had all been here. Maybe not this exact situation, but close enough. That moment when you realize the game is rigged, the deck is stacked, and no amount of hard work will save you because the system was never designed to let people like you win. Here's what's going to happen, Graves said finally. First, you quit the cleaning job. Today. Call them, tell them you're done, don't give reasons. The diner job you keep for now because it's daytime and visible. Safer. Second, you and Eli stay here until we secure your apartment or find you something better. Third, those men watching your building, we handle them. You don't need to know how. You just need to trust that they won't be a problem anymore. I can't afford... Didn't ask if you could afford it. I'm telling you what's happening. You want to contribute? Fine. We'll figure that out later. But right now, your job is to stop drowning long enough to breathe. Our job is to make sure you get that chance. Mara looked like she wanted to argue. Pride demanded it, but exhaustion won. What if they come after me? After Eli? What if by accepting your help, I make things worse? Then they deal with us, Cutter said quietly, and we don't lose. The confidence in his voice wasn't bravado. It was certainty built from decades of training and violence and surviving situations where losing meant dying. These men understood threat assessment. They understood how predators thought. More importantly, they understood that sometimes the only language bullies respected was overwhelming force delivered with absolute conviction. Mara nodded slowly. Something in her posture shifted. Not surrender, but acceptance. The difference mattered. Surrender meant giving up. Acceptance meant trusting someone else to share the weight. Thank you, she managed. Don't thank us yet, Nova said. We haven't done anything worth thanking. The door at the end of the hall opened again. Eli emerged, hair sticking up, eyes still heavy with sleep. He saw his mother sitting with the bikers, and fear flashed across his face before he read her body language. Tense, but not terrified. Guarded, but not defensive. Mom, it's okay, baby. We're just talking. Are we leaving? Mara glanced at Graves. He gave a slight nod. Her choice, her call. She took a breath. Not yet. These men are going to help us for a while. Is that okay? Eli looked at the bikers, looked at his mother. Some silent communication passed between them, the kind only shared by people who'd survived together and learned to trust each other's instincts. Yeah, he said. That's okay. And just like that, the Iron Saints world got more complicated. The next 48 hours unfolded like controlled chaos. The clubhouse transformed from outlaw sanctuary to temporary shelter with practiced efficiency. Nova cleared out a storage room and turned it into something livable. Clean bedding, space heater, lock on the inside of the door. Cutter went shopping with a list of necessities Mara had been too proud to ask for. Food that didn't come from food banks, clothes that fit, school supplies that weren't borrowed or stolen. Anvil pulled club connections to run background on the men watching Mara's building. What he found made the situation darker. They're not independent operators, Anvil reported during an impromptu meeting in the garage while Mara and Eli were out getting lunch with Nova. They're muscle for a guy named Vincent Crow. Runs girls, drugs, protection rackets, basically anything that turns desperate people into profit. Works out of a strip club on the east side called the Velvet Cage. Has cops on payroll, which is why Mara got blown off when she reported them. How deep is his reach? Graves asked. Deep enough. He's been expanding into struggling neighborhoods, targeting single mothers, waitresses, women one bad month away from homelessness. Offers them money. When they refuse, he applies pressure. Some fold. Some disappear. Some end up dead in ways that look like accidents. Cutter's expression went dead cold. We're killing him. No. Graves' voice cracked like a whip. We're not. The fuck we're not. You heard Anvil? This guy's a predator. And if we kill him, we start a war we can't finish. Crow's connected. We go after him directly. We bring heat on the club, on Mara, on that kid. We do this smart, or we don't do it at all. Then what's the play? Graves was quiet for a long moment, mind working through scenarios and consequences. These situations required surgical precision, not blunt force. You didn't defeat predators by becoming monsters yourself. You defeated them by removing their power systematically until they had no choice but to retreat. We cut off his access, Graves said finally. Mara's not living at that apartment anymore. Can't threaten what you can't reach. We spread word through the neighborhood, quietly, that anyone getting pressured by Crow's people has somewhere to go for help. We make him lose so many targets that his operation stops being profitable. And if his guys push back, then we respond. But we don't initiate. We don't escalate. We protect and let him make the mistake. That's a long game, Anvil said. Long games are how you win without losing everything in the process. Cutter shook his head but didn't argue. He understood the logic, even if his instincts screamed for immediate violence. That was the difference between soldiers and veterans. Soldiers followed orders. Veterans understood that survival meant choosing battles carefully and accepting that some wars couldn't be won with bullets. What about the apartment, he asked. We just abandon it? We clean it out, get her stuff. Make sure Crow's people know she's gone, but not where she went. Then we find her something better, something safer. Somewhere Eli can go to school without looking over his shoulder. That takes money. Then we find money. Graves. We find it, Cutter. I don't care how. Run extra security jobs, take on courier work, liquidate some of the club's savings. Whatever it takes. This family is under our protection now. That means something. We don't half-ass protection. The garage fell silent. These men understood what Graves was really saying. This wasn't a temporary charity case. This was adoption. Mara and Eli were becoming part of the club's extended family, which meant they got the same protection, resources, and loyalty as any patched member. That was a serious commitment, the kind that redefined priorities and exposed vulnerabilities. The club needs to vote on this, Anvil said carefully. Brotherhood this deep, everyone needs to be on board. Then we call church, tonight. Full table. Everyone weighs in. And if someone votes no, then we discuss it until we reach consensus. But I'm telling you now, I'm not abandoning them. So anyone who votes no better have a damn good reason beyond discomfort or inconvenience. Anvil studied him for a long moment. You're getting attached. We're all getting attached. Don't pretend you're not. I'm not pretending anything. I'm saying attachment makes us vulnerable, makes us sloppy. You taught me that. I also taught you that some things are worth being vulnerable for. Graves met his eyes without flinching. This is one of them. The sergeant-at-arms nodded slowly. All right, I'll set up church for tonight, but you better be ready to defend this, because not everyone's going to see it your way. He was right. Church that night was the kind of tense that made violence feel inevitable. The chapel, what the saints called their meeting room, was barely big enough for the long table and mismatched chairs where patched members gathered to vote on club business. Smoke hung thick despite the ventilation. Coffee and whiskey sat within easy reach. The room smelled like leather and gasoline and old anger. Graves sat at the head of the table, president's gavel within reach. To his right sat Cutter, vice president, face unreadable. To his left sat Anvil, sergeant-at-arms, watching everything with the focused intensity of someone expecting trouble. Nova sat further down. She wasn't a patched member, but as club medic she had voice in meetings that affected club welfare. The rest of the table was filled with men who'd earned their patches through blood and loyalty. Wraith, Juice, a scarred veteran named Bishop, a former cage fighter called Tomahawk, and two older members named Gunner and Raleigh, who'd been with the Saints since the beginning. Everyone's clear on why we're here, Oris? Graves asked, tone neutral. Nods around the table. Word had spread fast. The club was harboring a civilian family. The president wanted to make it official. Some members were supportive, some had questions. At least one, Bishop, looked openly hostile. Let's get to it then, Graves continued. 48 hours ago, a kid walked into our garage asking for help. His mom's been working herself to death trying to survive. She's got predators circling her building. No support system, no safety net. She's drowning. We can help. Question is whether we should. Floor's open. We're not a charity, Bishop said immediately. No preamble, no diplomacy, just blunt opposition. We're a motorcycle club. We protect our own. This woman and her kid, they're not our own. They're civilians who got dealt a bad hand. That's not our problem. Everything's not our problem until we make it our problem, Cutter shot back. Kid showed courage most grown men don't have. That means something. It means he's desperate. Desperate people make bad decisions. We take them in. We inherit their mess. Debt, drama, enemies. You really want to go to war with some pimp over a woman we barely know? We're not going to war. We're providing protection. Same thing in different words. Bishop leaned forward. Look, I get it. Kid's sympathetic. Mom's struggling. But where does it end? We help one family, word spreads. Suddenly, we've got every sob story in the county knocking on our door. We gonna help them all? Become some kind of outlaw welfare system? Maybe, Nova said quietly. Every head turned. Maybe that's exactly what we become. Would that be so bad? Bess? Yes, Bishop snapped, because it's not sustainable. We've got finite resources, limited manpower, real enemies who want us dead or in prison. We start diluting focus to play hero for civilians. We get sloppy. We get caught. We get destroyed. All because we couldn't say no to a kid with big eyes and a sad story. The argument was logical. Cold, but logical. Graves had considered the same points himself during sleepless hours. The problem was logic didn't account for the fact that every man in this room had once been the desperate person making bad decisions. They'd all been the one drowning while society watched. Someone had helped them. Sometimes the club, sometimes a stranger, sometimes dumb luck. And that help had made the difference between survival and suicide. He's got a point, Gunner said reluctantly. The older biker looked uncomfortable. I ain't saying we turn our backs, but we need limits, boundaries. Otherwise, we lose ourselves trying to save everyone else. I'm not proposing we save everyone, Graves said. I'm proposing we save this family, right now, this moment. Then we assess. If it becomes a problem, we adjust. But walking away because helping might be inconvenient, that makes us exactly what people already think we are. Criminals who only care about ourselves. We are criminals, Bishop shot back. That's not an insult, it's a fact. And criminals survive by being selfish, by protecting their own first. Always. Then maybe it's time we redefine what our own means. The table erupted. Half the members started talking at once, some agreeing, some pushing back, everyone with opinions forged from personal experience and trauma. Graves let it go for 30 seconds, then brought the gavel down hard enough to crack wood. Enough. We vote. Anyone opposed to offering protection and resources to Mara and Eli Mercer, say so now. Bishop's hand went up immediately. Gunnar hesitated, then raised his slowly. 2 votes against. Not enough to block, but enough to signal division. Anyone in favor? Every other hand rose. Cutter, Anvil, Nova, Wraith, Juice, Tomahawk, Raleigh. The majority was clear. Motion carries, Graves said. The Mercers are under club protection effective immediately. We provide housing, security, and resources as needed. Anyone got a problem with that decision? Take it up with me privately. Otherwise, we move forward as a united front. Clear? Clear, most voices chorused. Bishop stayed silent, jaw tight with barely contained anger. Gunnar just looked worried. The meeting broke up slowly. Members filed out, conversations continuing in low voices. Nova caught Graves's eye and gave a slight nod. Support, solidarity, shared understanding that they'd just crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Cutter clapped him on the shoulder once, then disappeared into the garage. Anvil lingered. That was close, he said. Closer than I wanted. Bishop's gonna be a problem. Bishop's always a problem. Difference is, now I know where he stands. And if he escalates? Pushes back harder? Graves met his eyes. Then I remind him that I'm president for a reason. And if that doesn't work, we have a more direct conversation about loyalty and what it means to wear this patch. Anvil nodded grimly. Just be ready. Divisions like this, they fester. And when they blow, people get hurt. I know. But knowing and preventing were different things. The seed had been planted. All it needed was pressure and time to grow into something that could tear the club apart. 3 days later, the fragile peace shattered. Mara was working her diner shift, second day in a row without the cleaning job. First time in years she'd left work before midnight. When 2 men walked in wearing expensive suits and predatory smiles. They sat at the counter, ordered coffee, waited until Mara was alone near the register. Then the taller one leaned forward. You're hard to find these days, Mara. She froze. Recognized the voice. The blond man from outside her apartment, scar across his left eyebrow, eyes that looked at her like she was merchandise. I don't know you, she said, keeping her voice steady. Sure you do. We've been neighbors for months. I'm hurt you'd forget. He smiled, didn't reach his eyes. You disappeared from your apartment, stopped coming home. That's rude. Mr. Crow likes to know where his investments are. I'm not his investment. Everyone's someone's investment. Question is whether you're smart enough to pick the right investor. He slid a business card across the counter. Mr. Crow wants to meet, have a conversation, clear up some misunderstandings. You should come, tonight, 8 p.m. Address is on the card. And if I don't? The man's smile widened. Then we have a different conversation, one your son probably wouldn't enjoy. Kids his age, they're so fragile. Accidents happen. Mara's blood turned to ice. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to grab Eli and disappear, is there a problem here? The diner manager appeared from the kitchen. Older woman with sharp eyes and a baseball bat she kept under the counter for occasions like this. No problem, the man said smoothly, standing. Just catching up with an old friend. We'll be in touch, Mara. Don't keep Mr. Crow waiting. They left. The bell above the door chimed cheerfully. Mara stood frozen behind the counter, the business card burning in her peripheral vision like a live grenade. Her hands shook. Her breath came short. The walls closed in. You okay? The manager asked. Mara couldn't finish. Couldn't think. Terror overwhelmed everything else. They'd found her, threatened Eli. And she dragged the Saints into this mess without fully understanding how deep it went, or how dangerous these people were. She finished her shift on autopilot, served customers, made coffee, smiled when appropriate. Every second she expected the men to come back, expected violence, expected the fragile safety she'd just started to feel to shatter completely. When her shift ended, she didn't go back to the clubhouse. She walked, just walked, down streets she didn't recognize, through neighborhoods that blurred together, trying to outrun panic that followed like a shadow. Her phone buzzed, text from Nova. "Where are you?" Eli's asking. She didn't respond, couldn't, because if she went back, she put everyone in danger. If she stayed away, she faced Crow alone. Either way, someone got hurt. She ended up in a park, small, neglected, swings creaking in the wind. She sat on a bench while the sun set and tried to figure out how her life had become this impossible. How accepting help had somehow made everything worse. How trying to protect her son had put him in more danger. Her phone buzzed again. Not Nova this time. "Graves, talk to me." 3 words. Simple. Direct. Not a demand. An offer. She stared at the screen. Everything in her wanted to type, "I'm fine, don't worry. Maintain the walls. Handle it alone." That's what she'd been doing for 4 years. But exhaustion and fear, and the memory of Eli's face when he thought she might leave without saying goodbye, made her fingers move. "They found me. At work," threatened Eli. The response came 30 seconds later. "Where are you?" She sent her location, didn't know why, didn't have a plan, just knew she couldn't carry this alone anymore. And these dangerous bikers with their scars and their leather and their violent reputations were the only people who'd looked at her drowning and offered a hand instead of advice. 15 minutes later, 3 Harleys pulled up to the park. Graves dismounted first, followed by Cutter and Nova. They didn't run, didn't crowd her, just approached with the careful respect given to wounded animals who might bolt if startled. Graves sat on the bench beside her, close enough to talk, far enough to give space. "Tell me what happened." She did. Every detail. The men. The threat. The business card she'd left on the counter because touching it felt like accepting poison. When she finished, her voice was raw. "I can't do this," she whispered. "I can't put you in danger. Can't risk Eli. I should just, I don't know, meet with this Crow person, see what he wants. Maybe we can work something out." "No." Graves's voice was absolute. "You're not meeting with him. You're not working anything out. You're not negotiating with predators." "Then what do I do? He'll come after Eli. He'll do nothing because he's going to be too busy dealing with us." Graves turned to face her fully. "Mara, listen to me. This is what we do. We protect people. We handle threats. You're not alone anymore. You're not handling this yourself. We are. Together. But I need you to trust that we know what we're doing. What if someone gets hurt because of me? Then someone gets hurt. That's the risk we accept. Comes with the territory. You don't understand. I understand perfectly." His voice went quiet, dangerous. "I understand there's a man threatening a 10-year-old boy because his mother refused to be a victim. I understand that kind of evil doesn't respond to reason or negotiation. It responds to force, and we've got plenty of that." He paused. "But this only works if you trust us. Completely. No more running off. No more trying to handle it alone. You're part of this now. Act like it." The words were harsh but not unkind. They were the truth delivered by someone who understood that sometimes compassion meant demanding people accept help even when pride screamed otherwise. Mara nodded slowly. "Okay. Say it like you mean it. Okay, I trust you." "Good. Let's go home." They rode back to the clubhouse as the last light bled from the sky. Inside, Eli was sitting in the main garage with Wraith, the young prospect showing him how to clean spark plugs. When he saw his mother, relief flooded his face. He ran to her. She caught him, held on like he was the only thing keeping her anchored to reality. "I'm sorry," she whispered into his hair. "I'm so sorry." "It's okay, Mom. We're okay." But they weren't okay. Not yet. Because 30 minutes later, while Mara and Eli were eating dinner, Nova had prepared. Anvil's phone rang. The conversation was short. When he hung up, his expression was grim. "Crow's people just hit Mara's old apartment. Tore the place apart looking for information. Landlord called it in. Cops showed up, found nothing, said it was probably junkies looking for copper wire. He paused. They left a message spray-painted on the wall. Said if Mara doesn't show up tomorrow night, they're coming for the kid. Matais. The garage went silent. The kind of silent that precedes explosions. Every man present understood what this meant. The threat had escalated from pressure to direct action. Crow wasn't bluffing. He was committed. And committed predators didn't stop until they got what they wanted or someone made them stop. Graves stood. His face was carved from stone. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of absolute conviction. Church. Now. Everyone. We end this tonight. The chapel filled quickly. This time there were no debates. No votes. Just grim-faced men preparing for the kind of work that left marks on souls. Bishop sat with arms crossed, expression unreadable. Even he understood. You could oppose helping civilians in theory, but once threats were made against people under club protection, you defended them or you lost all claim to honor. Here's the situation, Graves began. Vincent Crow runs predators out of the velvet cage. His people threatened Eli. Hit Mara's apartment. They're escalating because we're in the way of their business. They think we'll back down. They're wrong. What's the play? Tomahawk asked. We send a message. Nothing permanent. Tomahawk. Nothing that brings federal heat. Just clear, undeniable communication that the Mercers are off limits, and anyone who touches them answers to us. Astis. That's going to start a war, Gunner said quietly. No, it's going to prevent one. Crow's a businessman. He operates on profit calculations. We make protecting him more expensive than leaving us alone. He'll pull back. But it requires we hit hard enough that he feels it. How hard? Graves's smile was cold enough to freeze gasoline. Hard enough that he remembers every time it rains. The plan came together with the practiced efficiency of men who'd run operations in hostile territory and knew that success required precision, timing, and absolute commitment. They would hit 3 locations simultaneously: Crow's strip club, his primary drug house, and the garage where he kept his vehicles. Non-lethal but devastating. Deliver a message that couldn't be misunderstood. When? Cutter asked. Tonight. They're expecting Mara tomorrow. We move first. Fast. Overwhelming. Then we disappear before cops can respond. And if Crow retaliates, then we're ready. But he won't. Not immediately. He'll assess. Calculate. And while he's doing that, we fortify. Make the clubhouse untouchable. Put the Mercers somewhere he can't reach. Win through preparation, not escalation. The table voted, this time unanimous. Even Bishop raised his hand, because whatever disagreements existed about helping civilians, once people under club protection were threatened, the response was unified. That was the line. Cross it and face consequences delivered with brutal clarity. They moved out at midnight, 3 teams, 6 riders each. Graves led the team hitting the velvet cage. Cutter took the drug house. Anvil handled the garage. The plan was simple. In, deliver the message, out. No lingering, no unnecessary violence, just enough force to make the point crystal clear. Graves's team arrived at the strip club like thunder, bikes roaring, leather cuts displayed openly, faces covered with bandanas. They breached through the front door with practiced efficiency. The bouncer tried to intervene. Cutter dropped him with a single punch. Inside, music pounded. Lights flashed. Dancers froze mid-routine as armed bikers flooded the floor. Everyone out! Graves commanded, voice cutting through the chaos. This ain't about you. Move, now! The civilian customers fled. Smart ones left tips. The dancers disappeared into back rooms. Within 2 minutes, the club was empty except for the Saints and 3 of Crow's men guarding the VIP section where the real business happened. Where's Vincent? Graves asked. Fuck you. Cutter stepped forward. Wrong answer. He moved like violence was choreography. 2 quick strikes, disarm, submission hold, the man on his knees gasping for air. Try again. He's not here, sir. Where, what? Don't know. Swear to God. Graves pulled out his phone, took a photo of Crow's men kneeling in submission. Then he pulled a spray paint can from his cut and wrote on the wall in letters 3 feet high, "Mercers are protected. Back off or bleed." "You tell your boss we're not asking," Graves said. "We're informing. He comes after that family again. We burn everything he's built until there's nothing left but ash and regret. Clear?" The men nodded frantically. Graves gestured to his team. They left the way they came. Fast, coordinated, gone before sirens wailed in the distance. Behind them, the strip club stood violated but intact. The message delivered. The line drawn. Similar scenes played out at the drug house and the garage. Cutter's team cleared the stash house in under 4 minutes, leaving products scattered and dealers zip-tied but unharmed. Anvil's team disabled every vehicle in Crow's garage, slashed tires, smashed windows, engine blocks filled with concrete mix. Total damage? Hundreds of thousands of dollars. Casualties? 0. Message? Absolute. They reconvened at the clubhouse as dawn broke. Adrenaline still humming, waiting for retaliation that might come immediately or not at all. Inside, Mara and Eli slept unaware that violence had been done in their name, unaware that the most dangerous men in Red Hollow County had just gone to war with a predator and won the first battle through overwhelming force and strategic brutality. "Now what?" Cutter asked, lighting a cigarette with hands that didn't shake despite what they'd just done. "Now we wait," Graves said. "See how Crow responds. If he's smart, he backs off. If he's proud, he escalates. Either way, we're ready. And if he comes here, then we defend, with everything we have." But as the sun rose over the Nevada desert, painting the sky in shades of blood and fire, Graves felt something he hadn't experienced in years, genuine fear, not for himself, not for the club, for a woman and a child who'd walked into their lives by accident and become the thing he was most afraid to lose. Because protecting people meant caring about them, and caring meant vulnerability. And vulnerability meant that for the first time since war had taught him to stop feeling, Graves Maddox had something precious to defend, something that could be taken away, something that made him human again, whether he wanted to be or not. Outside, engines cooled. Inside, families slept. And in the space between protection and obsession, wounded men discovered that sometimes the hardest battles aren't the ones you fight with fists. They're the ones you fight with your heart still bleeding from the last time you let someone in. The retaliation came exactly 36 hours later, but not the way anyone expected. Graves was in the garage running diagnostics on his Road King when his phone vibrated. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer. Protocol said unknown numbers during operations got ignored, but instinct made his thumb move. Sometimes survival meant trusting the wrong impulses. "Yeah, but Bookie." Graves Maddox? The voice on the other end was smooth, educated, the kind that belonged in boardrooms, not making threats. "We haven't been properly introduced. Vincent Crow." Every muscle in Graves' body went rigid. He gestured sharply at Cutter, who was 20 feet away organizing tools. "The universal signal for threat active. Listen now." Cutter's expression hardened. He moved closer, silent as death. "I'm listening," Graves said, tone flat. "Good. Because what I'm about to say, you're only going to hear once." Crow's voice carried no anger. No emotion at all. That made it worse. Angry men made mistakes. Calm predators calculated consequences. "Your little demonstration the other night was impressive, coordinated, professional. You made your point. The Mercer woman is under your protection. I respect that, truly. Then we're done here." "Whoa, I it. Not quite. See, there's a problem. A complication you weren't aware of when you decided to play hero. Mara Mercer isn't just some struggling single mother I was recruiting. She's collateral." The word landed like a blade between ribs. "Explain." Her ex-husband, the one who disappeared 4 years ago. He didn't just walk away. He stole from me. $250,000 meant for a shipment that never arrived. Money I'd fronted based on his assurances and his wife's name on certain paperwork she was too trusting to read before signing. When he ran, he left her holding the debt. Legally, financially, criminally. Graves's jaw clenched so hard his teeth ached. "You're lying." "Am I?" "Ask her about the papers she signed in 2020. The loan documents, the business partnership agreements her husband said were just formalities. She put her name on my money, Mr. Maddox. And when money disappears, someone pays." Those are the rules. She didn't know. Doesn't matter. Ignorance isn't innocence when money's involved. I've been patient. Gave her time to figure out repayment options. But then you interfered. Made her think she could just walk away from her obligations. That's not how this works. Cutter was already typing on his phone, pulling up records, searching for confirmation. His face went pale. He turned the screen toward Graves. There it was, public records, loan documents filed with the county, Mara's signature clear as day. Business partnership, personal guarantee. $250,000 backed by her name, even if she'd never seen a dime. What do you want? Graves asked, voice going cold enough to freeze blood. Simple. She works off the debt. 1 year in one of my establishments. High end, nothing street level. She keeps herself clean, does what she's told, the debt gets cleared monthly until we're square. Or, Crow paused for effect. You buy her out. $250,000 cash, 30 days. Otherwise I file charges for fraud and embezzlement. She goes to prison. The kid goes to foster care. And you get to explain to your club why protecting a civilian landed federal attention on your operations. You file those charges, you expose your own business. I've got lawyers who make problems disappear, Mr. Maddox. What have you got? Leather and attitude? That doesn't play in court. The smile was audible. 30 days? Think about it. And while you're thinking, remember, I didn't start this war. You did. I'm just reminding you that some battles can't be won with intimidation and broken windows. The line went dead. Graves stood frozen, phone still pressed to his ear, mind racing through scenarios and solutions and finding nothing but walls. Behind him, the garage door scraped open. Mara walked in carrying 2 mugs of coffee, her face showing the first genuine smile he'd seen since they met. She looked rested, safe, like maybe she was starting to believe the nightmare was over. She saw his expression and the smile died. What happened? She asked, voice already thin with dread. We need to talk. Now. Conference room. Get Nova and Anvil. 10 minutes later, 6 people sat around the scarred table in the back room while rain hammered the metal roof and thunder rolled across the desert like artillery fire. Graves repeated Crow's call word for word. Watched Mara's face drain of color as understanding hit. Watched her hands start shaking so badly she had to clasp them together in her lap. I didn't know, she whispered. He told me. Danny told me it was just paperwork for his business. He needed a co-signer because his credit was bad. He said it was temporary, that it wouldn't affect me. I trusted him. I signed. And then her voice broke. He left, cleaned out our account and disappeared. I thought he just abandoned us. I didn't know there was money, debt, any of it. Sad. The loan documents, Anvil said, phone in hand, scrolling through records. Filed March 2020. Business partnership for import/export operations. Your name is guarantor. Everything looks legitimate on paper. If Crow wanted to press charges, he could make it stick. But I never saw the money. I never benefited. How can I be responsible? Because the law doesn't care about intent, Nova said gently. You signed. That makes you liable. Crow knows it. That's why he's been patient. He's been waiting for the right moment to leverage this. Mara looked like she was going to be sick. So what do I do? Work for him? Let him... She couldn't finish. The implications were too horrible. No, Graves said flatly. That's not happening. Then what? You can't pay him. I know you can't. That's more money than... We'll find it. How? Rob a bank? I can't let you... You're not letting us do anything. We're making a choice. Same as we made when we brought you here. Same as we made when we hit his operations. We don't abandon people because things get complicated. This isn't complicated. Bishop's voice cut through the conversation like a blade. He'd been silent until now, sitting in the corner with arms crossed and expression carved from stone. This is exactly what I warned about. We take in a civilian, we inherit her problems. Now we're looking at $250,000 in debt or federal charges that'll bring ATF and FBI sniffing around our operations. Tell me again how this was worth it. Shut up, Bishop, Cutter growled. No, someone needs to say it. We've got limited resources, real enemies, and now we're supposed to liquidate everything we've built to bail out a woman who signed papers without reading them? That's not protection. That's stupidity. She's under our protection, Graves said, voice dangerously quiet. That means something. Or did your patch stop meaning anything? My patch means I protect brothers. She's not a brother. She's a liability that's about to cost us everything. The room exploded. Cutter lunged across the table. Anvil grabbed him. Nova stood, putting herself between the men with both hands raised. The argument devolved into shouting, accusations, defenses, years of buried resentment surfacing in the kind of fury that preceded violence. Mara stood abruptly. Stop, please, just stop. Her voice wasn't loud, but something in it made everyone freeze. She looked at Graves with eyes full of resignation and terrible understanding. He's right. Bishop's right. I'm destroying you, everything you've built. I'll turn myself in. Plead guilty. Maybe they'll be lenient. Maybe Eli can stay with you until I get out. Sit down, Graves commanded. I can't keep. I said sit down. He didn't raise his voice, didn't need to. The authority in it made her legs fold automatically. He turned to Bishop. You're right. This is complicated, expensive, dangerous, but we knew that going in. We voted. Club voted. You think I'm making this call alone? Every man at that table agreed to protect this family. That protection doesn't come with an asterisk that says, unless it costs too much. So yeah, it's going to hurt. Yeah, we're going to have to make sacrifices. But that's what brotherhood means. We bleed for each other. And right now she's one of us, whether you like it or not. You're letting emotion cloud judgment. Maybe. Or maybe you forgot what it feels like to have someone fight for you when the world's trying to drown you. Either way, I'm president. This is my call. We find the money. We clear the debt. We protect the family. Anyone got a problem with that? There's the door. Bishop stared at him for a long, dangerous moment. Then he stood, chair scraping against concrete. You're making a mistake. Noted. You staying or leaving? Another pause, the kind that stretched until tension became unbearable. Finally, Bishop sat back down. I'm staying. But when this blows up, and it will, don't say I didn't warn you. Fair enough. Graves turned to Anvil. How fast can we liquidate assets without triggering red flags? 3 weeks, maybe 4. We've got the security contracts, some savings, couple of properties we could sell fast. But even maxed out, we're looking at maybe 150,000. We're short. Then we find the rest. Extra jobs, loans, whatever it takes. Graves, Nova said carefully, what if there's another way? What if we expose Crow's operation? Get law enforcement involved legitimately. If he goes down, the debt goes with him. Too slow, too uncertain. We've got 30 days. Crow's got cops on payroll and lawyers on retainer. By the time we build a case that sticks, Mara's in custody and Eli's in the system. Cutter leaned forward. What about going to the source? Track down the ex-husband. Make him pay what he stole. 4 years cold. Could be anywhere. Dead, for all we know. So we're just giving up? No. We're being realistic about options and timelines. Graves rubbed his face, exhaustion creeping in. But yeah, if anyone's got contacts who could find a ghost, now's the time to use them. The meeting broke up with more questions than answers. Mara disappeared to the room she shared with Eli, moving like someone walking to their own execution. Nova followed to make sure she wasn't alone with dark thoughts. Bishop left without another word, engine roaring into the night carrying anger and resentment. The rest of the club scattered to their corners, some to make calls, some to start liquidating assets, all of them feeling the weight of a promise that was costing more than any of them had anticipated. Graves stayed in the conference room, staring at papers that proved Mara's signature and doom were one and the same. Cutter lingered in the doorway. You sure about this? He asked quietly. No, but I'm doing it anyway. What if we can't raise the money? Then we get creative. Creative how? Graves didn't answer, because the truth was he didn't know. All he knew was walking away wasn't an option, and sometimes you made promises you couldn't keep and hoped desperation made you smart enough to find a way. The next 72 hours were a blur of controlled chaos. The club ran every security job they could find, picked up courier work that paid fast but asked no questions. Anvil started liquidating assets, a property here, equipment there, calling in favors and debts years old. The cash trickled in. Not fast enough, not nearly enough. By day 5, they had $80,000, quarter of the way there with 25 days remaining. The math was brutal and getting worse. By day 7, Mara stopped sleeping. She'd lie awake in the dark, listening to the sounds of men working themselves to exhaustion for her sake. Guilt eating her alive. Nova found her in the garage at 3 a.m. one night, staring at nothing. "You should be resting," Nova said. "Can't. Every time I close my eyes, I see Eli in foster care. See you all losing everything because I was stupid enough to trust the wrong person." "You weren't stupid. You were in love. There's a difference." Is there? Because it feels the same from here. Nova sat beside her on the cold concrete. "When I was 26, I trusted a man who said he loved me. He didn't. He was using me to move drugs through the hospital where I worked. By the time I figured it out, I was complicit. Lost my license, lost my career, ended up homeless with a black eye and no future." She paused. "The Saints found me sleeping in that bus station and didn't ask why, didn't judge, just helped. I thought I'd never forgive myself for being that stupid. But eventually I realized survival means learning from mistakes, not drowning in them. I don't know how to survive this. One day at a time, 1 hour if that's what it takes. And you let people who care about you share the weight." But sharing the weight was exactly what Mara couldn't do. Because every dollar the Saints raised felt like theft. Every hour they worked felt like time stolen from their own lives. The debt wasn't just financial, it was emotional, psychological. The kind that made you wonder if being saved was worth the cost extracted from your saviors. On day 9, everything changed. Cutter was following a lead, a whisper from a contact who knew a guy who might have seen Danny Mercer in Reno 6 months ago. Long shot, desperate shot, but desperation was all they had. He tracked the contact to a dive bar on the outskirts of town, the kind where nobody asked names and everyone paid cash. The contact was nervous, kept looking over his shoulder. "I shouldn't be talking to you." "But you are." "Why?" "Because I heard you're looking for Danny Mercer, and I heard you're willing to pay for information." Cutter slid an envelope across the bar. 500 cash. "Talk." "He's dead. Has been for 3 years. Killed in a motel in Arizona. Robbery gone wrong," cops said. "But that's not the whole story." The man leaned closer. The man. Danny didn't run because he stole from Crow. He ran because he was stealing for someone else. Someone who paid him to skim from Crow's shipments and make it look like carelessness. When Crow figured it out, he put a price on Danny's head. Guy was dead within 6 months. Cutter's blood ran cold. "Who paid him?" "Don't know. But whoever it was had serious reach, serious money, and serious reasons for wanting Crow's operations disrupted." The man paused. "Word is, Danny's wife never knew. She was the perfect cover, put her name on everything, so if it went bad, she took the heat instead of the real players. Classic misdirection." "You got proof?" "Just rumors. But rumors from people who don't lie about this kind of thing." Cutter left the bar with more questions than answers and a sick feeling in his gut. If this was true, if Mara had been set up from the beginning as a scapegoat, then the debt wasn't real. The threat was manufactured, and that meant Crow knew exactly who was behind the theft, but was leveraging Mara anyway because she was vulnerable and isolated and easy to exploit. He called Graves, explained everything. The president's silence on the other end was the kind that preceded explosions. "Get back here, now. We need to verify this." But verification was harder than it sounded. The contact disappeared. The rumor trail went cold. Every lead ran into walls built from fear and self-preservation. People who knew the truth weren't talking because talking meant becoming targets. On day 12, the break came from an unexpected source. Bishop showed up to the morning meeting with a file folder and an expression that said he'd found something nobody wanted to see. He dropped the folder on the table in front of Graves. "You're not going to like this?" "What is it?" Background on Crow's operations, financials, associates, patterns." Bishop opened the folder. 3 years ago, someone was systematically disrupting Crow's supply chains. Shipments got intercepted. Money disappeared. It was professional, coordinated. And it all stopped right around the time Danny Mercer died. So I tracked the timing, cross-referenced it with known players in the region, and I found something. He pulled out a photo, black and white, surveillance quality. It showed a man in his 50s, gray hair, expensive suit, shaking hands with someone whose face was turned away from the camera. This was taken 4 months before Danny died. The man in the suit is Marcus Webb. He runs a competing operation out of Las Vegas. Rumor says he wanted Crow's territory, paid people to sabotage him from the inside. Graves studied the photo. The other person, can you ID them? No, face is obscured, but the timestamp matches up with when Danny would have been making pickups for Crow. And look at this. Bishop pointed to something in the background, a vehicle partially visible. That's Danny's truck. I pulled DMV records. No question. The implications crashed through the room like a freight train. Danny hadn't been a simple thief. He'd been a paid operative working for someone trying to destroy Crow. Mara hadn't just been collateral damage. She'd been deliberately positioned as a fall guy, someone whose name on the papers would absorb the blame if the operation went sideways. Which it had, spectacularly. So Crow knows, Cutter said quietly. He knows Mara was set up. He knows the debt isn't really hers. But he's leveraging it anyway because she's the only one he can reach. Webb's untouchable. Danny's dead. She's the last person he can make pay. That means the debt is bullshit, Anvil growled. We don't owe him anything. Legally we do, Bishop corrected. Her signature is on the documents. Doesn't matter if she knew or not. Doesn't matter if she was set up. The law sees a name and a debt. That's all. Then we expose it. Go public. Show everyone what Crow's doing. And risk him filing charges out of spite? Risk Mara going to prison while lawyers argue about intent and culpability? Graves shook his head. No, this doesn't change the situation. It just explains it. We still need to clear the debt or find another way out. There is another way, Bishop said slowly. Everyone turned. We go after Webb. Make him pay what he owes. He's the one who orchestrated this. He should foot the bill. Webb's in Vegas, protected by his own crew. We go after him, we start a war we can't win. Maybe we don't have to win. Maybe we just have to make enough noise that Crow realizes going after Mara isn't worth the attention it brings to his own vulnerabilities. The strategy had merit, ugly merit, but merit nonetheless. If they could prove Webb was behind the theft, really prove it, not just rumors and circumstantial evidence, they might be able to leverage that information. Make it so expensive for Crow to pursue Mara that he'd rather cut his losses and move on. But it required something none of them wanted to do. It required going into hostile territory, extracting information from people who made Crow look like amateur hour, risking everything on the chance that truth mattered more than vengeance. How long would it take? Graves asked. To build a real case? Week, maybe 2. We'd need surveillance, financial records, proof that connects Webb directly to the theft. Then we'd need to present it in a way that Crow can't ignore. We've got 18 days before Crow's deadline. Then we better move fast. The decision was made with grim efficiency. Bishop would lead a small team to Vegas, him, Wraith, and Juice. They'd gather intelligence, build the case, get proof that Mara was set up. Meanwhile, the rest of the club would continue raising money. Belt and suspenders. 2 paths to the same goal, clearing Mara's name or buying her freedom. Whichever came first. Mara found out about the plan that evening. She cornered Graves in the garage while he was prepping Bishop's bike for the trip to Vegas. You're sending people to Nevada for me, she said. Not a question. We're chasing a lead. Don't lie to me, not now. Nova told me what Bishop found. You're going after the people who set me up. Yeah, we are. And if it goes wrong, if Bishop and those men get hurt or killed because of my ex-husband's mistakes, us. Graves set down his wrench, turned to face her fully. Then they get hurt or killed doing something they chose to do. Nobody's forcing this, Mara. Nobody's a victim here, except maybe you. We're making tactical decisions based on available information and acceptable risk. That's what we do. I can't live with more blood on my hands. Then you're going to have a hard life, because blood's already there. Has been since the moment your husband put your name on those papers. Question is whether you let that blood define you or whether you survive long enough to wash it off. How? How do I wash this off? By accepting help, by trusting that people can care about you without expecting payment, by believing that maybe, just maybe, you're worth fighting for. The words hung between them, raw and honest and dangerous. Mara's eyes filled with tears she'd been holding back for days. She took a shaky breath. Why are you doing this, really? Not the club, not brotherhood. You. Why do you care? Graves was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of confessions made in darkness to people who might not survive to remember them. Because 15 years ago, I watched half my unit die in an ambush because command ignored our warnings and sent us into a kill zone anyway. I survived. They didn't. And I spent years thinking I should have died with them, that surviving was a mistake, a cosmic error. He paused. The club saved me, gave me a reason to keep breathing, a purpose beyond guilt, and I swore that if I ever got the chance to save someone the way I was saved, I'd take it. No hesitation, no conditions. So yeah, this is dangerous. Yeah, it's expensive. But you and your kid walked into our lives asking for help, and I'll be damned if I let you drown when I've got the means to pull you out. Mara stared at him, saw the truth written in scars and shadows, saw a man who'd been broken and rebuilt and broken again until he'd learned that sometimes the only way to heal yourself was to heal someone else. Thank you, she whispered. Thank me when it's over. But over was still a long way off, and the universe had more tests waiting. Tests that would push everyone past their breaking points and force them to decide what they were really willing to sacrifice for people they'd promised to protect. Bishop's team left for Vegas at dawn. 3 bikes, minimal gear, maximum risk. They'd check in every 12 hours. Any longer than that without contact meant something had gone wrong. The first check-in came on schedule. In position, starting surveillance. The second check-in was 4 hours late. Had to relocate. Web security spotted us. We're good but moving slower. The third check-in never came. Graves waited. Tried Bishop's phone, straight to voicemail. Tried Wraith. Same. Juice. Nothing. 12 hours of silence became 18. 18 became 24. And with every passing hour, the fear grew that 3 brothers had ridden into Vegas and weren't riding back. On day 16, a package arrived at the clubhouse. No return address. Just a box wrapped in brown paper with Graves's name printed in block letters. Cutter opened it carefully, expecting explosives or threats. Inside was a phone, old model, burner, a single number programmed into it, and a note that said, "Call me." Graves dialed. The voice that answered wasn't Crow. It was deeper, rougher, more dangerous. "Graves Maddox, we need to talk." "Who is this?" "Marcus Webb. I believe you've been looking for me." "Well, you found me. Or more accurately, I found you. Your boys made quite a mess in my city. Had to lock them up until we could have a civilized conversation." Every muscle in Graves's body went rigid. "If you hurt them, relax. They're fine. Uncomfortable, but fine. I'm not a monster. I'm a businessman, and right now I have a business proposition." "I'm listening." Vincent Crow is trying to collect a debt from a woman named Mara Mercer. A debt that technically I owe, since I'm the one who paid her husband to steal from Crow in the first place. I'm willing to settle that debt, clear her name, make the whole thing disappear. But I need something from you first. "What?" Crow has something that belongs to me. Information. Files. Insurance he's been holding in case I ever move against him. I want it back. You get it for me. I pay Mara's debt, and your boys come home safe. Everyone wins. And if I refuse, then your friends stay my guests until they stop being useful. Mara goes to prison. Crow gets everything he wants, and you get to live with the knowledge that you could have prevented all of it, but chose pride over pragmatism. The phone went dead. Graves stood frozen, the device still pressed to his ear, while the walls closed in and the floor dropped out beneath him. This was the twist. The betrayal he hadn't seen coming. Not from his brothers, not from Mara, but from reality itself. The cruel revelation that winning one battle meant walking into another, and that protection always carried a price tag written in choices you never wanted to make. He had 2 options: steal from Crow to pay Webb, Risk everything the club had built for a woman and child who'd become family in the span of 2 weeks. Or refuse. Let Bishop, Wraith, and Juice become casualties of a war they'd volunteered for. Let Mara face prison. Let Eli disappear into a system that destroyed more kids than it saved. There was no good choice, no clean path forward, just 2 terrible options, and the sickening realization that sometimes being a hero meant deciding whose sacrifice you could live with. Outside, thunder rolled across the desert. Inside, the most dangerous man in Red Hollow County finally understood what Crow had known all along. The debt wasn't about money. It was about control, leverage, the slow, agonizing process of backing people into corners until they had no choice but to do the unthinkable just to survive. And in a locked room down the hall, Mara held her sleeping son and whispered prayers to a universe that had stopped listening years ago, unaware that the men protecting her were about to cross a line that would change them forever. Because that's what happens when you try to save people from the darkness. Eventually, you have to step into it yourself. And once you're in, the shadows never quite let go. Graves didn't sleep that night. Couldn't. He sat in the garage with Webb's burner phone on the workbench in front of him, staring at it like it was a loaded gun. Which it was. Just a different kind of weapon. One that killed with choices instead of bullets. Cutter found him there at 4 a.m., still motionless, eyes red from exhaustion and something darker. "You gonna tell me what's on that phone?" Cutter asked, leaning against the doorframe. "A deal with the devil." "Which devil?" "Well, does it matter?" Graves picked up the phone, turned it over in his hands. "Webb's got Bishop, Wraith, and Juice. Says he'll release them and pay Mara's debt if we steal something from Crow. Files. Insurance. Something Webb needs badly enough to trade for. And if we don't? Then our brothers stay hostages. Mara goes to prison. Eli gets swallowed by the system. We lose everything we've been fighting for." Cutter was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of old wars and older wounds. "You know what you're describing, right? We steal from Crow. We become criminals for real. Not outlaws playing at the edges, actual thieves working for a man who's already proven he'll betray anyone for profit. We cross that line, we can't come back." "I know, and you're considering it anyway. But what choice do I have? Let 3 brothers rot in Vegas? Watch Mara get destroyed by a debt that was never hers? Tell Eli his mom's going to prison because we decided our moral purity mattered more than his family?" Graves set the phone down hard enough to crack the screen. "There's no good option here, Cutter. Just degrees of terrible. And I'm trying to figure out which terrible I can live with. Maybe there's a third option. I'm listening. We go to Crow. Tell him everything. Webb, the setup, the stolen files. Maybe he already knows. Maybe he doesn't. But we put it on the table. Full transparency. See if there's a way to untangle this mess without becoming pawns in someone else's game." Graves laughed. Bitter, broken sound. "You think Crow's gonna believe us? Trust us? We destroyed his operations, spray-painted threats on his walls. Now we're gonna walk in and ask for cooperation? He'll kill us before we finish the pitch. Maybe, or maybe he's smart enough to realize Webb played us all. Used Mara to draw us in. Used us to pressure Crow. This whole thing might be a setup to get both clubs fighting each other while Webb consolidates power. We tell Crow that. Appeal to his business sense. Enemy of my enemy, and all that." It was insane. Suicidal. The kind of strategy that only worked in movies where heroes survived impossible odds through luck and narrative convenience. But it was also the only path that didn't require them to become something they'd sworn they'd never be. "If we walk into Crow's territory, we might not walk out," Graves said. "Yeah, but if we work for Webb, we definitely lose ourselves. I'd rather die trying to do the right thing than live knowing we sold our souls for pragmatism." When'd you become the moral compass? Same time you became the one willing to sacrifice it. Someone's got to keep us balanced. Graves studied his vice president's face, scarred, exhausted, determined. They'd fought together, bled together, pulled each other back from edges too dark to name. If Cutter thought this was the play, maybe it was worth the risk. "All right," Graves said finally. "We try it your way. But we go prepared. Full gear. Exit strategy. First sign this goes sideways, we fight our way out and regroup." "Agreed." When? Now, before I change my mind or Webb calls back demanding an answer. They woke Anvil and Nova, explained the situation in clipped, urgent sentences, watched their expressions shift from confusion to understanding to grim acceptance. This was it. The moment where theory became practice, where protection stopped being abstract and became concrete, measurable in blood and bullets and the choices you made when there was no time left to think. I'm coming, Nova said immediately. No, Graves countered. You stay here, guard Mara and Eli. If this goes bad, you get them out. Use the emergency funds, fake IDs, whatever it takes. They disappear, and you make sure they stay gone. Graves, that's an order. His voice carried the weight of absolute authority. You're the only one they trust completely. If we don't come back, you're their lifeline. I need to know someone's here protecting them. Can you do that? Nova's jaw worked. She wanted to argue, wanted to fight, but she understood the logic. Understood that sometimes the bravest thing you could do was stay behind and guard what mattered most. I can do that, she said quietly. Good. Anvil, you're with us. Bring the heavy hardware. If Crow decides violence is the answer, I want options. Yam. They geared up in silence, leather cuts over Kevlar, weapons concealed but accessible, phones loaded with backup contacts and emergency protocols. This wasn't a social call. It was a negotiation backed by the credible threat of mutual destruction, the kind that either ended in alliance or bloodshed with no middle ground. At 5 a.m., 3 Harleys rolled out of the clubhouse into pre-dawn darkness. The desert was cold, silent, the kind of silence that made you hear your own heartbeat and question whether the next one was guaranteed. They rode hard, engines screaming, headlights cutting through shadows that seemed to lean in and watch with hungry eyes. The velvet cage sat dark and shuttered when they arrived, closed for business but never really empty. Security cameras tracked their approach. Lights flickered on inside, dim, threatening. The glow of predators waking up to find prey walking into the den voluntarily. Graves killed his engine, dismounted, stood in the parking lot with hands visible, making no sudden movements. Cutter and Anvil flanked him, same posture, same careful stillness. They were armed. They were dangerous. But they were also here to talk, and starting a firefight in Crow's territory when they were outnumbered 10-1 was suicide masquerading as bravery. The front door opened. 4 men emerged. Crow's security, muscle-wrapped in expensive suits, eyes cold with professional violence. They didn't draw weapons, didn't need to. The message was clear. One wrong move, and this parking lot became a graveyard. Vincent will see you, the lead man said. But you leave the hardware at the door. Not happening, Graves replied flatly. Then you don't come in. Then tell Vincent we've got information about Marcus Webb and the files he's so desperate to recover. Information that might make Webb's little insurance policy worthless. If he wants to hear it, he can accept that we come armed or we don't come at all. The security exchanged glances. One pulled out a phone, made a quiet call. 30 seconds of hushed conversation. He hung up. He says you can keep your weapons, but if you pull them, my team puts 3 rounds in each of you before you finish the draw. Clear? Crystal. They were escorted through the club, past empty stages and silent poles, through doors marked private, down hallways that smelled like money and desperation, into an office that looked like a bank vault had sex with a boardroom. Expensive desk, leather chairs, artwork that probably cost more than the clubhouse. And behind it all, Vincent Crow. He was younger than Graves expected, early 40s, fit, handsome in that polished way that came from personal trainers and tailored suits. His eyes were the only thing that betrayed the predator underneath, flat, calculating, the gaze of someone who'd watched people beg and felt nothing. Graves Maddox, Crow said, leaning back in his chair. I have to admit, I didn't expect you to walk through my front door. Thought you'd try the theft angle. Work for Webb like a good little pawn. You knew about Webb's offer. Of course I knew. I've had people watching your clubhouse since the night you spray-painted my walls. You think I don't track threats? Monitor communications? Webb called you on a burner I've been intercepting for 3 weeks. I know exactly what he offered. Know he's holding your boys. Know he's leveraging Mara Mercer's debt to manipulate you into stealing my insurance files. Crow smiled without warmth. The question is why you're here instead of breaking into my safe like Webb expected. Because we're not his pawns, Graves said, and we're not stupid enough to think stealing from you ends well for anyone. Smart. So what do you want? Answers, truth, and maybe an alliance if you're willing to consider it. Crow laughed. Genuine sound, surprised and slightly impressed. You've got balls, I'll give you that. You destroy my operations, threaten my life, and now you want to negotiate? What makes you think I won't kill you right here? Because killing us doesn't solve your problem. Webb's still out there, still trying to undermine your business, still holding leverage over people who matter to both of us. You can kill us and stay locked in this stalemate, or you can listen for 5 minutes and see if there's a path forward that doesn't end with everyone bleeding. I'm listening. You've got 4 minutes. What? Graves talked fast, laid out everything they'd discovered. The setup, Danny Mercer's role as Webb's operative, Mara's unwitting participation, the coordinated campaign to sabotage Crow's supply lines. He explained how Webb had used the debt as bait to draw the Saints into conflict with Crow, creating chaos that benefited Webb's expansion plans. He presented it clinically, without emotion, just facts and timelines and the cold logic of manipulation. When he finished, Crow was silent for a long moment. His fingers drummed against the desk, slow, rhythmic, the tick of a bomb counting down. You expect me to believe Mara Mercer didn't know? When he finally asked. I expect you to acknowledge that evidence supports it. Her financials show no unexplained income. Her behavior pattern matches someone surviving, not someone profiting. And Webb admitting he paid Danny proves she was the fall guy from the start. Admitting to you, not in court, not on record, just words that can't be proven. Which is why we need your help. You've got resources we don't, connections, ways of making Webb vulnerable. We want our brothers back. We want Mara's debt cleared. You want Webb neutralized and your insurance files protected. Those goals align. So let's stop fighting each other and start fighting the person who played us both. Crow studied him with the focused intensity of a surgeon examining a tumor. What exactly are you proposing? Joint operation. We extract our people from Vegas. You provide intelligence and support. In return, we help you recover whatever leverage Webb's holding and make sure he can't use it. Once that's done, you forgive Mara's debt because it was never legitimate, and we part ways. No more conflict. No more interference in each other's business. And if I refuse, then we steal your files like Webb wants. Not because we're his pawns, but because we've got no other choice. And yeah, you'll probably kill us in the process. But we'll make it expensive, messy, public. The kind of attention that brings federal task forces and media scrutiny. You'll win, but the cost will be everything you've built. Is that really worth holding on to a debt that was manufactured to manipulate you? The office went silent except for the hum of air conditioning and someone's breathing that sounded too loud. Cutter's hand rested casually near his weapon, ready but not threatening. Anvil stood like a wall, immovable and patient. Graves kept his eyes locked on Crow's, refusing to blink, refusing to show fear or doubt or anything except absolute conviction. Finally, Crow leaned forward. I'll make you a deal. Not because I believe in alliances or honor among thieves, but because Webb's been a thorn in my side for 3 years, and I'm tired of playing defense. You help me eliminate him as a threat, not kill. I'm not asking for that. Just remove his leverage and cripple his operations enough that he stops being my problem. Do that, and I'll forgive Mara's debt. Release any claim. Your boys come home. Everyone walks away. Hunt. What about Webb? He's still holding our people. Leave that to me. I've got contacts in Vegas, people Webb owes favors to. I make a few calls, apply the right pressure. Your brothers get released within 24 hours, but Crow's voice went cold. If you cross me, if this is some elaborate setup, I will destroy you, your club, your families, everyone you've ever cared about. I'll make it slow, painful, educational. Understand? Understood. When do we start? Now. Crow stood, buttoned his suit jacket with precise movements. I've got a team ready to move on Webb's Vegas operation. You're coming with. Consider it insurance. You help me, I help you. We succeed together or burn together. No half measures. We need to check in with our people first. No. You committed the moment you walked through that door. Your people are safe. Mine are watching your clubhouse. Nothing happens to them unless you betray me. This is happening now. Decide. Graves looked at Cutter, at Anvil, saw the same calculation reflected in their eyes. This was insane, dangerous, potentially a trap that ended with all of them dead in a Vegas desert. But it was also the only play that gave them leverage, the only chance to save their brothers and Mara without sacrificing their souls. "We're in," Graves said. "Good. My team leaves in 20 minutes. Keep up or get left behind." They moved fast. Crow's convoy was 6 vehicles, SUVs loaded with security, weapons, and technology that made the Saints' operation look like amateur hour. Graves, Cutter, and Anvil rode in the lead vehicle with Crow and 2 of his top people. Nobody spoke. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. The drive to Vegas took 4 hours. 4 hours of silence and suspicion and the constant awareness that one wrong move meant death. But as the city lights appeared on the horizon, bright and artificial against the desert darkness, something shifted. They were committed now. In the storm. No turning back. Crow's intelligence was terrifyingly precise. He had Webb's location, his security patterns, his vulnerabilities. The operation was planned down to the minute. Hit 3 locations simultaneously, extract intelligence, cripple Webb's network before he could respond. Clinical, professional, the kind of operation that required military precision. "Your boys are being held in a warehouse on the east side," Crow explained as they geared up in a parking structure 2 blocks from their first target. 2 guards, reinforced door. Webb's keeping them alive as leverage, but not comfortable. "We hit the warehouse last after we've secured the primary objectives. That way Webb can't use them as hostages during the main assault." "That puts them at risk if something goes wrong," Cutter argued. "Everything puts them at risk. This minimizes variables. Trust the plan, or walk away." There was no walking away. Not now. They checked their weapons, synchronized watches, went over the plan one final time. Then they moved. The first target was a high-rise office building where Webb kept financial records. Crow's team moved like shadows, bypassing security, neutralizing cameras, accessing the server room with practiced ease. Graves and Cutter provided overwatch, while Anvil worked with Crow's tech specialists to copy hard drives and extract files. 7 minutes in and out. No alarms, no confrontation. Ghost work. The second target was harder. A nightclub Webb used as a front for laundering money. More security. More civilians. Higher risk of collateral damage. They waited until 3 a.m. When the crowd thinned, then breached through the back. Found Webb's office. Cracked his safe. Inside were documents, contracts, ledgers, photographs that proved connections to politicians and law enforcement. Insurance, just like Webb had been holding over Crow. Graves photographed everything, loaded it onto encrypted drives, was halfway to the exit when gunfire erupted. Webb's security had finally caught on. 4 men with automatic weapons appeared at the far end of the hallway, opening fire without warning. Crow's team returned fire. The nightclub turned into a war zone, screaming, bullets punching through drywall, strobing lights making it impossible to track targets. Graves dove behind a bar. Cutter grabbed a civilian and shielded her with his body. Anvil returned fire with cold precision, dropping 2 shooters before his magazine ran dry. "Move!" Crow shouted over the chaos. "Back exit! Now!" They fought their way through smoke and panic and the deafening roar of close-quarters combat. Graves took a round to the shoulder. Kevlar stopped penetration, but the impact cracked ribs and drove the air from his lungs. He kept moving, had to. Stopping meant dying, and dying meant everyone who'd trusted him lost everything. They made it to the vehicles, burned out of the parking structure with Vegas Metro Police converging from 3 directions. Sirens screamed, helicopters appeared overhead. This was no longer a quiet operation. This was open warfare, and they were in the middle of it. "The warehouse!" Graves gasped, clutching his shoulder. "We need to get our people. Change of plans," Crow said, face grim. "Webb knows we're here. He'll be evacuating, moving assets, including your boys. We've got maybe 10 minutes before they're gone. Then we go now. It's not a secured location anymore. It's going to be defended. We're looking at a firefight. I don't care. Those are my brothers. We're getting them out." But Crow studied him for a moment, saw something that made him nod. All right, but we do this fast and loud. No time for finesse. We breach, extract, and burn everything behind us. No prisoners, no mercy. Agreed? Agreed, Ish said. The warehouse sat in an industrial district, abandoned buildings, broken streetlights, the kind of place where bodies disappeared and nobody asked questions. Crow's convoy parked 3 blocks out. They approached on foot, using darkness and derelict structures for cover. Heat signatures showed 6 hostiles inside, 2 guarding the prisoners, 4 in defensive positions waiting for exactly this kind of assault. Flashbangs, Crow ordered. Breach on my mark. Kill anyone who aims a weapon. Spare anyone who surrenders. Primary objective is extraction. Everything else is secondary. They stacked at the door. Graves' shoulders screamed with every breath. Cutter's hands were steady despite the blood splattered across his cut. Anvil checked his magazine one last time. This was it. The moment where everything came together or fell apart. Mark. The door exploded inward. Flashbangs turned the interior into blinding light and deafening noise. Graves moved on instinct, training taking over, body executing patterns burned into muscle memory by years of combat. He saw a hostile raising a weapon, double-tapped him center mass, kept moving, saw another going for cover. Cutter dropped him. Kept moving. And there, in the back corner, Bishop, Wraith, and Juice. Zip-tied to chairs. Bloodied but alive. Conscious. Eyes widening with recognition and relief. Clear! Anvil shouted, sweeping the last corner. Graves cut the zip ties with shaking hands. You good? Been better, Bishop managed through split lips. But yeah, we're good. Can you move? Try and stop us. They hauled the 3 men up, started back toward the exit, almost made it. Then more gunfire erupted from outside, Webb's reinforcements arriving faster than expected. The extraction team was pinned between hostiles inside and fresh shooters converging from the street. We're blocked, Crow said, voice tight with controlled fury. Back door's our only option. Back door leads to a dead-end alley, one of his men countered. We'll be trapped. Then we make a stand here, hold them off until— No! Graves grabbed his arm. You've got what you came for. Files, intelligence. Everything you need to bury Webb. Get your people out. We'll cover your exit. That's suicide. That's brotherhood. We protect what matters. Your operation matters. Get those files to safety. Make sure Webb burns for what he's done. We'll handle the rear guard. Bam! Crow stared at him like he was seeing something unexpected. Maybe respect. Maybe recognition that some men were wired to sacrifice without hesitation. Whatever it was, it made him nod once. Sharp, military. Don't die, Crow said. I don't forgive debts to dead people. Then come back for us when it's clear. But Crow's team disappeared through the back exit. Graves, Cutter, Anvil, Bishop, Wraith, and Juice positioned themselves at windows and corners. 6 men against God knew how many. The kind of odds that made survival a miracle and death a statistical certainty. Just like old times, Chess, Cutter said, checking his ammunition. Old times we had air support and extraction plans. Us, Graves countered. Details. We'll see. The first wave hit 30 seconds later. Muzzle flashes lit up the darkness. Bullets punched through walls. Windows exploded. The warehouse turned into a kill box, and they were in the center of it. Graves fired until his magazine ran dry. Reloaded. Fired again. Saw hostiles drop. Saw more replace them. Felt something hot punch through his leg. Ignored it. Kept fighting. Bishop went down, caught around to the thigh. Wraith dragged him to cover. Juice returned fire with a captured weapon, face twisted into controlled rage. Anvil fought like a machine, mechanical precision, no wasted movement, every shot a kill. Cutter screamed defiance into the chaos, refusing to go quietly, refusing to let their last stand be anything less than legendary. And then, impossibly, the gunfire stopped, not because they'd won, because Vegas Metro Police had arrived in force. Tactical teams, helicopters, the full show. Webb's people scattered, the warehouse was surrounded. The Saints were trapped, not by enemies, but by the law. And that was almost worse. Weapons down! Voices shouted through megaphones. Come out with hands visible! Now! Stam! Graves looked at his brothers, saw exhaustion, pain, blood, but also determination. They'd come for each other, fought for each other, survived together. Whatever happened next, they'd face it the same way. "We surrender," Graves shouted back. "Coming out unarmed. We've got wounded." Bish. They stumbled out of the warehouse into blinding spotlights and shouted orders. Hands went behind heads. Bodies pressed to concrete. Zip ties secured wrists. But they were alive. Against all odds. Impossibly. Miraculously. They were alive. As the police loaded them into transport vehicles, Graves caught sight of Crow 3 blocks away, watching from the shadows. Their eyes met across the distance. Crow gave a slight nod. The message was clear. The debt is paid. We're square. Then he disappeared into the Vegas night, files secured, Webb's empire crumbling, the balance of power shifted permanently. In the back of the police van, Bishop leaned close to Graves. "What the hell just happened?" "We went to war," Graves replied, "and somehow didn't lose." "Are we under arrest?" "Probably, but Crow's got connections. He'll make calls. We'll be processed and released. Slap on the wrist, maybe a warning, but we're going home." "And Mara?" "Free. Webb's leverage is gone. Crow forgave the debt. She's clear." Bishop was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried something that sounded like grudging respect. "You were right. Back at church when I argued against helping her. You were right. Doesn't matter now. We're past that. No, it matters. You saw something worth fighting for when all I saw was liability. You committed when I wanted to walk away, and because of that, we're all still breathing. So," Bishop paused, struggling with words that didn't come easy. "Thank you for being better than me when it counted." Graves closed his eyes, pain and exhaustion crashing through him in waves. "We're brothers. That's what we do." The van rolled through Vegas streets toward processing and paperwork, and the slow machinery of justice that would ultimately cut them loose because Crow's lawyers were already making Mara's coerced debt and Webb's manipulation the story. By the time they reached holding, the narrative was set. The Saints were victims who'd been forced into conflict by organized crime. Heroes, even, depending on which news outlet told the story. 12 hours later, they walked out of Metro lockup into the Nevada sunrise, bruised, exhausted, alive. 3 bikes waited at the curb, courtesy of Crow's people, because apparently deals made in blood carried weight, even in the criminal underworld. They rode home through the desert as the sun climbed higher, rode through pain and exhaustion and the surreal awareness that they'd just survived something that should have killed them. The clubhouse appeared on the horizon like a mirage made solid. Harleys were lined up outside, the entire club waiting. And there, standing at the front with Nova beside her, was Mara holding Eli's hand. When the 3 bikes pulled in and the engines died, the silence was profound. Then Nova broke it by running forward and checking Graves's wounds with professional efficiency. Mara stood frozen, tears streaming down her face, unable to speak or move or do anything except watch the men who'd risked everything return damaged but unbroken. "It's over," Graves said quietly. "Debt's forgiven. You're free, both of you." Mara's knees buckled. Nova caught her. The woman sobbed into the medic's shoulder, not from pain, but from relief so profound it overwhelmed everything else. Eli ran to his mother, wrapped his arms around her waist, and for the first time in his young life looked like a kid instead of a soldier. The club gathered in the garage. Nobody spoke. What was there to say? They'd declared war on the underworld and somehow won. Lost brothers and found them again. Crossed lines they'd sworn they'd never cross and came back mostly intact. The cost had been brutal, but the alternative had been worse. "Church," Graves said. 1 hour, everyone. We need to decide what comes next." Because there was always a next. Always another choice. Another test. The world didn't stop just because you survived one battle. It lined up the next one and waited to see if you'd learned anything or if you'd make the same mistakes all over again. But for now, for this brief, precious moment, there was just the sound of engines cooling and rain beginning to fall, and a family that had been drowning finally learning what it meant to breathe. And in the fading light of morning turning to storm, The Iron Saints stood together beneath their flickering neon sign and understood that protection wasn't a single act. It was a promise renewed every day, a choice made again and again and again, until the day you couldn't make it anymore. The rain fell harder as church convened. Not the usual gathering, no cigarettes, no whiskey, no casual posturing. This was different. The chapel felt smaller somehow, walls pressing in, air thick with exhaustion, and something heavier. Every man who'd made it back from Vegas bore marks. Graves's shoulder was bandaged tight beneath his cut. Bishop's leg was wrapped and elevated. Cutter had stitches across his knuckles from hand-to-hand fighting. Nobody had time to discuss. They were alive. But alive wasn't the same as whole. Graves sat at the head of the table, gavel within reach but untouched. He looked at each face in turn, brothers who'd followed him into hell and somehow crawled back out. The silence stretched. Nobody seemed eager to break it because once they started talking, they'd have to confront what they'd become in the past 48 hours. "We need to address what happened," Graves said finally, voice rough from smoke and screaming. "No bullshit, no avoidance. We crossed lines, worked with Crow, engaged in open combat on Vegas streets. We're lucky we're not in federal custody facing RICO charges. So before we move forward, everyone gets a chance to speak. Say what needs saying. Clear the air." Bishop spoke first. "I was wrong." The words came hard, forced through pride that didn't want to bend. About Mara, about helping civilians, about thinking protection had limits. "I saw liability where I should have seen family, and because of that I nearly got us all killed, so—" He paused, jaw working. "I'm sorry, to the club, to Mara, to everyone who had to risk their lives correcting my mistake." "Wasn't just you," Gunnar added quietly. "I voted against it too, thought we were being stupid. Turns out the stupid move would have been walking away. Kid needed help. His mom needed help. We gave it. That's who we are. I forgot that for a minute. Won't forget again." Around the table, heads nodded. The confession opened something, a pressure valve releasing steam that had been building since the night Eli walked through their door. They talked for an hour, not about tactics or strategy, but about fear and doubt and the terror of caring about people when caring made you vulnerable. They talked about the brothers they'd lost over the years, the ones who'd died, the ones who'd left, the ghosts that haunted every man in leather who'd survived long enough to realize survival meant living with constant loss. "Here's what I know," Cutter said when the confessions wound down. "We're not heroes. We're not saints despite the name. We're just men who got dealt bad hands and survived by taking care of each other. Mara and Eli, they got dealt worse. And when they came to us, we had a choice. Help or walk away. We helped. Cost us blood and pain and almost our lives. But I'd make the same choice again, every time. Because that's what separates us from animals. We protect the pack, all of it, not just the strong ones." "Agreed," Anvil said. "But we need to establish boundaries. We can't save everyone, can't fight every battle. We need criteria, ways to assess risk versus reward. Otherwise, we burn out trying to be everything to everyone." "Fair," Graves acknowledged. "But the criteria can't be convenience. Can't be whether it's easy or safe. Has to be based on need and whether we've got the capacity to help without destroying ourselves. Mara and Eli needed help. We had capacity. It was hard. It was dangerous. But it was right. That's the standard. Need plus capacity equals action. Everything else is just math." "Barbie." Pause. The table voted. Unanimous this time. They would continue helping people who fell through society's cracks. They would maintain boundaries to prevent burnout. They would assess each situation individually. And they would never, ever abandon someone who'd asked for protection once that protection was given. Those were the new rules. Written in blood. Sealed with scars. Non-negotiable. Church broke up as dawn light started filtering through the garage windows. The rain had stopped. The desert air smelled clean, fresh, like the world had been washed and reset. Graves stepped outside, lit a cigarette he'd quit smoking 3 years ago, and let the nicotine burn his throat because sometimes pain was the only thing that felt real. Nova found him there. She didn't speak, just stood beside him, sharing the silence. After a long moment, she took the cigarette from his hand, took a drag, handed it back. Mara wants to talk to you, she said finally. Tell her to rest. She's been through enough. She's not asking permission. She's asking for 5 minutes. You owe her that. I don't owe her anything. We're square. Wolchishike Batram. Graves. Nova's voice carried the kind of gentle steel that only came from women who'd survived their own wars. You risked everything for her, went to war, came back bleeding, and now you won't even give her 5 minutes to say thank you? That's not protection, that's avoidance, and we both know what you're avoiding. He did know. Knew exactly what he was running from. The same thing he'd been running from since Kandahar. The weight of caring about people. The terror of attachment. The certainty that everyone he protected eventually got hurt, or killed, or destroyed. And that saving Mara and Eli was just delaying the inevitable moment when his protection failed, and more blood stained his hands. I'll talk to her, he said quietly. Mara was in the garage, standing near the workbench where this had all started. She'd showered, changed into clean clothes Nova had provided, but her eyes still carried shadows that wouldn't wash away with soap and water. Trauma didn't work like that. It lived in you, changed you, made you someone new who remembered being someone old. You wanted to talk, Graves said, keeping his distance. I wanted to say thank you, properly. Not while I'm crying, or you're bleeding, or the world's on fire, just... She took a breath. Thank you. For believing me. For fighting for us. For not giving up when giving up would have been smarter and safer and saner. We don't give up on family. I'm not family. I'm a stranger who walked into your life and brought nothing but problems. You're wrong. Graves moved closer. Not crowding, just closing the distance words couldn't bridge alone. Family isn't blood. It's the people you choose to bleed for. We chose you. Eli chose us. That makes us family. Messy, complicated, dangerous, but family. Mara's eyes filled with tears. I don't know how to repay. You don't? That's not how this works. You don't repay protection. You pay it forward. Someday someone's going to need help. Someone drowning. Someone desperate. And you'll remember what we did for you, and you'll do the same for them. That's the payment. That's the debt. You survive. You heal. You become someone who helps the next person who can't help themselves. What if I can't? What if I'm too broken? Then you fake it until it's real. That's what we all do. Pretend we're brave until bravery becomes habit. Pretend we're whole until the cracks fill in. You're not broken, Mara. You're bent. There's a difference. Bent things can straighten. Broken things stay broken. You're not broken. She nodded slowly, wiped her eyes. Something in her posture shifted. Not confidence exactly, but acceptance. The kind that came when you stopped fighting reality and started working with it. What happens now? She asked. Now you figure out what comes next. We've got resources, connections. We can help you find work that doesn't kill you, housing that's safe, childcare for Eli. Whatever you need to build a life instead of just surviving. You've already done so much, and we'll do more. Because that's what family does. We show up, we help, we don't keep score. He paused. But there's one condition. Fear flickered across her face. What? You let us. You stop trying to do everything alone. You accept help without guilt. You trust that we're not going to disappear the first time things get hard. Can you do that? Mara was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded. I can try. That's all anyone can do. The next 2 weeks were a blur of reconstruction. The club pooled resources to find Mara an apartment, small but safe, in a neighborhood where kids played outside and nobody watched from cars with dead eyes. They helped her apply for jobs. Nova coached her through interviews. Cutter fixed her car. Really fixed it. Not the Band-Aid repairs she'd been limping by on. Anvil pulled strings to get Eli enrolled in a better school. Piece by piece, they built a foundation strong enough to hold weight. But the work wasn't one-sided. Mara started helping at the clubhouse, cooking meals for brothers who forgot to eat, organizing the chaos that came from men living without women's influence, bringing a kind of domestic stability the place had been missing. Eli spent weekends in the garage with Cutter, learning engines and welding and the unspoken language of men who communicated through work instead of words. The kid was good with his hands, patient, detail-oriented. He absorbed knowledge like a sponge and never complained about the heat or the smell or the repetitive nature of mechanical work. Cutter watched him one afternoon, saw the way he smiled when an engine fired up after hours of troubleshooting, and felt something crack open in his chest. A wound he'd been carrying since his own son died years ago in a car accident that should have been preventable. "You're good at this," Cutter said, voice rough. "Thanks. It's fun. Better than school." "School's important too." "I know. Mom says education is the only thing nobody can take from you." Eli paused, wiping grease from his hands. "Can I ask you something?" "Shoot." "Why'd you help us? Really, not the we protect family thing, the real reason." "What?" Cutter set down his wrench, looked at the kid who was too smart for his age and too observant to buy easy answers. "I had a son once, about your age. He died because I wasn't there to protect him. I was overseas, deployed, chasing threats halfway around the world while the real danger was at home. And I've been trying to figure out how to live with that for 8 years. That's not your fault." "No, but guilt doesn't care about fault. It just sits inside you and eats until you find a way to make peace with it." He paused. "Helping you and your mom, that's me trying to make peace. Trying to prove I can protect someone when it matters. Trying to save a kid because I couldn't save my own." Eli was quiet. Then he did something unexpected. He walked over and hugged Cutter, awkward, uncertain, but genuine. The kind of hug that said, "I see you in your pain and I'm sorry." Cutter froze. Hadn't been hugged in years, didn't know what to do with it. Then slowly, carefully, he put one grease-stained hand on the kid's shoulder and squeezed once. Not a hug exactly, but acknowledgement, connection. The first step toward healing wounds he'd thought were permanent. "Thanks," Cutter managed. "For what?" "For not being afraid of broken things." Across town, Graves sat in a diner nursing coffee that had gone cold while he stared at paperwork that made his head hurt. The club's finances were a mess after Vegas. They'd burned through savings, liquidated assets, called in every favor they had. Getting back to stable was going to take time and work, and sacrifices nobody wanted to make, but everyone had agreed to. The diner door opened. Vincent Crow walked in like he owned the place. Slid into the booth across from Graves without invitation. Ordered coffee, waited until the waitress left before speaking. "Heard you're having cash flow problems," Crow said. "We're managing. I could help with that." "We don't need your help." "Maybe not, but consider it payment for services rendered. You helped me neutralize Webb, recovered files that kept me out of prison. That's worth compensation." Graves studied him, looked for the angle, the trap, found nothing but genuine, if cold, business calculation. "What kind of compensation?" "Security contract. My operations need protecting. Your club needs steady income. It's a business arrangement. Nothing illegal. Nothing that compromises your integrity. Just professionals hiring professionals. We're not bodyguards. No, you're protectors. There's a difference. I need people who understand that sometimes protection means preventing violence, not causing it. Your reputation in that regard is growing. People know the Iron Saints protected a single mother from predators. Know you went to war for family. That's valuable. That's marketable. We're not marketing ourselves. Then let me do it for you. I've got connections. Legitimate ones. People who need security for events, businesses, private matters. I steer that work to you. You do the job. Get paid. Everyone wins. And you maintain your independence. No strings, no loyalty oaths, just business. It was tempting, dangerously tempting. The club needed income, needed stability. But working for Crow, even in legitimate capacity, felt like crossing a line, accepting that the ends justified the means, that surviving meant compromising. "Let me talk to my club," Graves said finally. "Fair enough, but Graves..." Crow leaned forward. "You need to understand something. The world we live in isn't black and white. It's not good guys versus bad guys. It's people trying to survive in a system designed to crush anyone who doesn't play by invisible rules. You helped Mara. You fought for her. That was noble. But nobility doesn't pay rent, doesn't put food on tables, doesn't keep your brothers safe. Sometimes survival means working with people you don't like to achieve goals that matter. That's not compromise, that's pragmatism. And if you want to keep helping people, you need to be pragmatic enough to keep your club alive. He stood, left cash for the coffee, walked out without waiting for a response. Graves sat alone in the booth staring at the money, wondering when protecting people had gotten so complicated and whether there was any path forward that didn't require selling pieces of your soul to maintain the capacity to do good. The club voted 3 days later, took the contract. Not because they liked Crow, not because they approved of his business, but because refusing meant abandoning their ability to help people like Mara. And that was unacceptable. So they made the hard choice, the pragmatic choice, the one that let them sleep at night because at least they were still fighting for something beyond themselves. Months passed. The rhythm of life settled into something almost normal. Mara thrived in her new job, medical office administrator, steady hours, decent pay. Eli excelled in school, started smiling more, started being a kid instead of a soldier. The apartment filled with life, posters on walls, laughter at dinner, the sound of a family healing by inches. But healing wasn't linear. Some nights Mara woke up screaming from dreams where men with dead eyes stood outside her window. Some days Eli flinched at loud noises or went quiet when asked about his father. Trauma didn't evaporate just because circumstances improved. It lingered, lurked, waited for vulnerable moments to remind you that surviving didn't erase what you'd survived. Nova taught Mara techniques for managing panic attacks, breathing exercises, grounding methods, ways to remind your body that the danger was past, even when your brain insisted it was still present. Slowly, incrementally, the screaming stopped. The flinching decreased. The quiet moments became less about fear and more about peace. One Saturday afternoon, 6 months after the night Eli walked into the clubhouse, the Saints organized a charity ride. Not the annual event they'd done for years, but something new. Something focused on helping struggling families before they reached the breaking point. They partnered with social services, shelters, advocacy groups, created a network where people could find help without judgment, without bureaucracy. Just human beings helping human beings, because that's what separated civilization from chaos. Hundreds of bikes showed up. Not just the Saints, but clubs from across the state who'd heard the story and wanted to be part of something that mattered. They rode through Red Hollow County with Mara and Eli in a sidecar beside Graves's bike. The kid wearing the matte black helmet that had started everything, grinning like he'd discovered flight. The town watched, some with suspicion, some with confusion, but most with something like respect. Because somewhere along the way, the Iron Saints had stopped being the feared outlaws on the edge of town and become the guardians everyone knew would show up when things got bad. They didn't lose their edge, didn't become soft, but they added dimension, became more than the reputation, became proof that dangerous men could be good men if they chose to be. At the ride's end, they gathered in the clubhouse parking lot. Hundreds of bikers, families they'd helped, community members who'd shown up to support the cause. Graves stood on the clubhouse steps, looking at the crowd, and felt something he hadn't felt since before war destroyed his certainty about the world. Hope. Not the naive kind that thought everything would work out, but the hardened kind that knew things were broken and believed they could be fixed anyway. That was the difference between optimism and hope. Optimism expected easy answers. Hope fought for them anyway, when easy wasn't an option. "Thank you," he said, voice carrying across the parking lot, "for showing up, for believing that community matters, for proving that people can still take care of each other when systems fail. This isn't about us. This isn't about clubs or colors or who's got the biggest patch. This is about remembering that we're all human, we all struggle, we all need help sometimes. And the only way we survive is by showing up for each other." The crowd cheered, not because the words were eloquent, but because they were true. And truth, real, honest, unpolished truth, was rare enough that people recognized it when they heard it. Later that night, after the crowd dispersed and the clubhouse quieted, Mara found Graves in the garage. He was working on his bike, routine maintenance, the kind of meditation that came from repeated motion and familiar patterns. "Big day," she said. "Yeah, good turnout." Eli couldn't stop talking about it. He said riding in the sidecar felt like flying. She paused. "He also said he wants to be like you when he grows up, a protector." Graves stopped working, set down his wrench. He shouldn't want that. Why not? Because being a protector means carrying weight that crushes most people, means making impossible choices, means living with scars that never really heal. I don't want that for him. I want him to have an easier life, a better one. Maybe. But maybe the world needs protectors. Maybe it needs people who've been hurt and survived and decided that their pain wouldn't be for nothing, that they'd use it to prevent other people's pain. Mara moved closer. You saved us, Graves. Not just physically. You saved us from giving up, from believing that nobody cared, from thinking we were alone in a world that had forgotten how to love. That matters. More than you know. More than I can ever express. You don't have to... Yes, I do. Because you need to hear it. You walk around like you're carrying the weight of everyone's survival, and you never stop to acknowledge that you're surviving too. That you matter too. That your life has value beyond what you do for others. She reached out, put one hand on his arm. You're a good man, Graves Maddox. Not perfect, not undamaged, but good. And the world needs more men like you. He didn't know what to say to that. Didn't have words for the way her acknowledgement cracked something open inside him, something he'd been keeping, locked, since the day half his unit died and he decided his life was only worth what he could do for others. So he just nodded, accepted it, let it settle in the spaces where guilt used to live alone. Thank you, he managed. For what? For trusting us, for letting us help, for surviving. We survived because of you. No. You survived because you're strong. We just made sure you didn't have to be strong alone. Winter came hard that year, desert cold that cut through leather and froze engines overnight. The clubhouse became a gathering place, not just for the saints, but for families they'd helped. People who needed somewhere warm to sleep, kids who needed meals when school was out. It wasn't planned, wasn't organized. It just happened organically as word spread that the Iron Saints' door was open to anyone who needed shelter. Nova ran the logistics. Cutter managed supplies. Anvil handled security. Graves oversaw everything while trying not to acknowledge that somewhere along the way they'd stopped being a motorcycle club and become something more. A community hub. A safety net. A family that kept expanding to include everyone who needed belonging. Bishop pulled him aside one night. You realize what we're doing, right? Helping people. Building something. Something bigger than us. Something that'll outlast us if we're not careful. Is that bad? I don't know, but it's different. We started as outlaws running from our pasts. Now we're, what? Social workers with motorcycles? Vigilantes with charity licenses? I don't know what to call it. Does it need a name? Bas. Names matter. They define things. Give them shape. And right now we're shapeless. We're whatever people need us to be. That's powerful. But it's also dangerous. Because if we're everything to everyone, eventually we become nothing to ourselves. Graves nodded slowly. So what do? We decide what we are, define it, own it, stop reacting, and start leading. Figure out our mission beyond help people who need help. Make it specific, actionable, something we can measure and maintain without burning out. You got suggestions? Yeah, we focus on families, specifically families with kids at risk of homelessness or foster care. We create a network, resources, emergency housing, job assistance, educational support. We become the safety net for people falling through the cracks, targeted, strategic, sustainable. That's a business plan. That's survival. We can't save everyone, but we can save some. And if we're smart about it, we can save them in ways that let them save others. Create a ripple effect. That's how you change things. Not by being heroes, by being infrastructure. It made sense. Cold, calculated, pragmatic sense. They put it to a vote. The club agreed. Over the next year, they built it. Partnerships with social services, connections with landlords willing to work with struggling families, relationships with employers offering second chances. They called it the Red Hollow Family Network. No paperwork, no non-profit status. Just people helping people through informal channels that actually worked because they weren't bogged down by bureaucracy. Mara became the public face. She understood the families they served because she'd been them. She spoke their language, knew their fears, could spot the difference between someone genuinely struggling and someone working the system. Under her guidance, the network grew, helped dozens of families, then hundreds. Became the kind of success story that attracted attention. Good attention and bad. The good came from media. Local news ran stories about the motorcycle club protecting families. National outlets picked it up. Suddenly, the Iron Saints were being interviewed, photographed, turned into folk heroes whether they wanted the attention or not. It brought donations, resources, legitimacy they'd never had as outlaws. The bad came from people who felt threatened by their success. Other clubs who thought the Saints had gone soft. Criminals who saw their protection racket as competition. Politicians who wanted credit for community work they'd never done. The threats were subtle at first. Whispers, rumors, suggestions that the Saints were laundering money or using the network for trafficking. None of it was true. But truth didn't matter when lies spread faster. Graves watched it happen with growing frustration. The way good work got twisted into something sinister by people who couldn't imagine altruism without ulterior motives. Let them talk, Nova advised. Actions speak louder. Keep doing the work. The families we help will defend us better than any PR campaign. She was right. When investigators showed up asking questions, the families they'd helped spoke up, testified to legitimacy, provided evidence that the Saints were exactly what they claimed, dangerous men trying to do good work. The investigations closed without charges. The rumors faded, and the work continued. 2 years after Eli walked through their door, Graves stood in the garage watching the kid, now 12, help Cutter rebuild a transmission. The boy had grown, filled out, lost the hollow look that had haunted his eyes. He laughed at Cutter's jokes, argued about methodology, worked with confidence that came from knowing he was valued. "He's going to be all right," Mara said, appearing beside Graves. "We both are, because of you. You did the work. We just provided space." "You provided more than space. You provided proof that the world wasn't completely broken, that people could still care, still fight for strangers, still believe that family was about choice, not blood." She paused. "I know I say this a lot, but I need you to really hear it. You saved our lives, not just from crow or debt or homelessness. You saved us from despair, from believing we were alone, from giving up. That's the real gift, the thing I'll never stop being grateful for. You would have survived without us. Maybe, but survival isn't living. You taught us how to live again, how to trust, how to belong. That's worth more than rescue. That's resurrection." Graves looked at her, saw the woman who'd been drowning 2 years ago now standing steady, eyes clear, carrying herself like someone who'd walked through fire and come out forged instead of broken. That was the victory, not the dramatic rescue, not the violence or the risk, but this, the quiet transformation of wounded people becoming whole people. That was what mattered. "You're going to be okay, Osman," he said. "We already are." Spring came with desert wildflowers blooming in explosions of color that lasted 3 days before the heat killed them. The Saints' annual charity ride had become legendary. Thousands of bikes, families from across the state, a rolling demonstration that community still existed if you built it intentionally. Eli rode in the sidecar again. 13 now, taller, more serious, less kid, more teenager, but still smiling that smile that made grown men remember why they fought. Mara rode behind Graves, arms wrapped around his waist, holding on not from fear but from trust. They rolled through Red Hollow County as the sun climbed higher, past the diner where Mara used to work double shifts, past the liquor store with her old apartment above it, now condemned, a ghost of what used to be, past the clubhouse with its neon sign that still read Saints, because fixing the broken letters felt like erasing history. The route ended at a park where families gathered for food and music, and the kind of celebration that reminded everyone why survival was worth the effort. Graves parked his bike, helped Mara dismount, watched as Eli ran off to join other kids, teenagers now, former scared children who'd been helped by the network and grown into young people with futures.